Welcome to the Retro Adventurers. I'm Jason Compton. It's December 27th, 2024. We're doing something a little bit different for the end of the year here. All of the game-playing hosts, as well as some of our interview guests, have come together for a year-end chatisode. We talk about retro adventures, other technology topics, minimal editing, just a freewheeling conversation. We do a little bit of game playing. We talk about some potentially new and interesting technology coming to text adventures and interactive fiction in the future. Want to just let you know that we appreciate hearing from you. We're active on Facebook. We're active on Blue Sky. We're happy to take your email at contact@retroadventurers.com. We're looking forward to a year full of more games, conversation, and other retro adventuring topics in 2025. And I'm going to take you to that chatisode right now. Welcome to the Retro Adventurers. It's the end of our first year, so this is going to be our first year-end chatisode. In this shift, we've got all four of the hosts that have brought you Retro Adventurers this year. I am Jason Compton. First, want to introduce the founder of the feast. He was the one who, just a little over a year ago, said, "Hey, I've got an idea. Let's start a retro adventuring podcast. I think I've got a name. I'm really close." Ben Collier. Ben, welcome back to the program.
Thanks ever so much, Jason. How are you doing? You all right?
I'm doing great. I'm doing great. Just the driver of this bus that you decided to set up. We've also got original retro adventurer Dave Hawkins. Dave.
Hello there. It's good to be back. Amazing to see Ben again after a year. And to be honest, I can't believe a year's gone by already.
Yeah, and also Nick Moffat, who's joined us for a couple of recent episodes. Nick, welcome to the chatisode.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, this is awesome. Ben had an idea and we all came together and supported it. I said, "Hey, I've got an idea. Let's do a year-end chatisode," and we're all here. Do want to kind of rewind a little bit because Ben, not everybody knows the origin story, but there was that humble little Facebook post a little over a year ago where you had the idea to kick this off, and the state of the world at the time, because I remember distinctly, you were like, "Well, there's Eaten by a Grue, but they really just don't publish all that much anymore," and we've kind of had the field to ourselves for most of the year. They just pop back up, but let's just kind of back up.
I didn't notice that they just popped up. We definitely have them to thank. I think definitely you, Jason. I think I'm right in saying this, and certainly the case for me. I had many years where one of the highlights of my trips, if I took a long trip in the car, I would always stick on a Grue episode and enjoy that. And they obviously did all the Infocom adventures, and then then everything got a bit more sporadic. And I'm sure they're doing all sorts of other stuff. They're really busy guys. But I thought I really fancy more retro stuff, real retro stuff, not modern IF. I wonder if there's anyone out there who's as mad as me and fancies having a go at this. And it turned out there were. So
we've been regretting it ever since.
Absolutely, yeah, that's right. And so I can't even remember which group it was that I stuck the message on. Maybe one or two groups. A few people. We kind of had chats, didn't we, back and forth. Jason was clearly very, very organized, more organized than me. Dave, you had all sorts of amazing background, and we just thought, well, yeah, okay, we've got a great bunch of people here. Let's go for it. And I think it was this time of year. I can't remember what the date was that we recorded the last one. It was definitely Christmas. It was Christmas.
It was just after Christmas.
Just after Christmas, yeah.
I just had COVID because I remember we'd actually delayed it.
Oh yeah.
I just got
COVID.
Yeah, I did, and it was I think it was early January. So I think we really are coming up to the pretty much the full year now.
Yeah, amazing. That's fantastic. It's been going great guns. No, it's absolutely amazing all the stuff that's been going on since I sort of did my show and go. But no, it's great. We've Jason and I have been talking, and it'll be lovely to get involved a little bit more in the new year.
Well, we'd love to have you back, definitely.
Well, we definitely said that we'd have a kind of rolling cast. I kind of rolled off for a bit longer than would have otherwise been advisable, but no, I think it's going to be great guns.
And we still haven't gone back to Nighthawk. 1 year on.
Yeah. Yeah,
And we keep promising we'll be there.
It's all fine. It's all fine. And Ben picked a game that's basically just Night Ark and a funny hat anyway to cover on our next episode. So yeah, we kicked off with the pawn and around the world, and I appreciate you guys indulging me on around the world. And I think it's been a nice feature of the show that we have covered both good and bad games, which brings us to Nick, who said the good fortune to cover Infocom and Topologica titles, and also some real rough ones. Hey Nick, are you enjoying your time on the show?
Oh, well, thank you. Yes, it is a pleasure to be invited to join this august company. And I do hope that we do keep this sort of rolling structure going, because it does seem like getting more people on to work with these games is all for the better.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, I like for me, like I know that this has given me an excuse to play games that, I certainly could have sat down to play at any time over the past 39 years or so. I don't know about you guys. Is there anything, in particular from your year on the show that you learned, or maybe wish that we could have gone into a little more detail on because you learned it after the show?
Well, I've certainly learned that I don't have as much time as I thought I had.
Yeah,
And these things really take up time.
It's amazing, isn't it?
It really is.
It's been my experience that my memory of playing these things as a child always seemed like I had more time, and I realize now just how much time I had as a child to devote to this sort of thing.
Absolutely.
I always felt like my time was being taken away by things like school and other obligations, but wow, do I not have enough time now.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the beautiful things about doing something like this is that you're kind of forced to sit back and go, right, I've got to have a look at this game. And then when you can really sit there and you're thinking, actually, I'm really quite enjoying this. I'm actually getting to immerse myself in something that if I was to say, I'm going to manage my time properly, I wouldn't be doing this. And it's a simple fact you get to do that. And you kind of get to go, well, I've got to really do it because I've got to go and tell everybody about this game, and so in a way you're kind of sort of going, well, look at me, I'm really working, honestly.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I think I remember particular games from the 80s, and I stop and I think about it and I realize, no, that memory is spread out over about 1.5 to 2 years sometimes, when I was, regularly playing this on weekends or with friends and talking about it in school. And it really is a different beast to try and sit down and, play one in time for an episode.
Yes, it is, definitely. But in a way, I mean, it keeps you focused, doesn't it? Because I've certainly actually looked at games from a different perspective, from when you just sit there and you play them and you be working out the puzzle. But when you're really trying to sort of review them as well as sort of remember what they meant to you, and in some cases, as Jason will know, that we've tried to choose games that maybe one of us hasn't played to give the broadcaster sort of that element of first exposure to certain games. And I think generally overall, it's beautiful that you can come into there and just actually look at them from a new perspective.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
the immediacy of playing something new, or like I didn't remember it this way, but that's been a lot of fun, and I know that it's been a nice excuse to explore some of the different publishers out there. Have you guys made any interesting retro acquisitions or any developments that you're working on your own hook on either one of the retro languages or one of the new ones?
It's interesting. I was having a conversation with a colleague at work. We do consultancy in tech, all sorts of tech, and one of the languages that we've been having to deal with is called Natural, which is associated with the database system Adabas that is extraordinarily reminiscent of COBOL. And the people who can write Adabas and Natural are not common. So we've had associate programmers getting involved in this, and they've come into it from they've done their TypeScript, they've come and they've joined the company, and they're ready to go, and they get go on, write some Natural. And it's completely alien to them. And one of the guys I was working with said to me, well, I just said to him, write a text adventure in it. So we've got this fella, and he's been writing a text adventure in Natural, which is this. I mean, I kind of want to sort of tell you about it by Wikipediaing it as we go. But Adabas is one hell of a thing. A contraction of the adaptable database system, and and it came with a language which, the introduction of natural was 1979. Not sure Adabas was 1971. So we've been doing a bit of a retro bit at work.
So the one thing that I have to my credit publicly out there on the internet in the interactive fiction world is that if you look up the Cloak of Darkness reference implementation for how to write this one simple game in a bunch of different languages, I have the reference implementation for the one in AWK, which is, of course, a language from around 1980, stands for the authors, Aho, Weinberger, and Kernahan. And that is a text-based language kind of similar in focus to its contemporary, this natural language, in the sense that the point of it was to take text files. So instead of a fancy database, you just have text files with, space-separated columns, and be able to process those with short scripts. So I wrote it, and I actually used that column splitting facility to do the tokenization for the input. So if you go and you have a look at that, I've got the reference implementation for AWK.
There you are. Yeah, IFWiki. You're under the Curiosities heading with AWK and the Scott Adams system, which is interesting because that's in a way that's the most purpose-built, or at least original purpose-built text adventure engine there is. So it's an interesting bit of curation on their part. But yeah, well done, Nick. 2005. Okay, just do what you want with it.
Just do it. Oh yeah, sorry. Don't mind the license. That it was another era. And then for my unfinished project right now, which I keep, again, being an adult with not enough time, and not ever standing to stick to simple mainstream systems such as, say, Punion form, I'm also working very occasionally on cramming something like a text adventure system into the 8 kilowords of 12-bit architecture of the PDP-8.
Wow.
This is an extreme example in size coding, and I've come up with basically just this past autumn, I came up with the idea that instead of keeping a dictionary of words, I should just soundex compress everything into individual 12-bit sort of truncated soundex tokens and use that as a hash. And once I started going down that route, I thought, oh, this is going to be absolutely terrible and absurd and fun, and I've got to finish it. So one of these days, I'm sure I'll get it finished, but right now it is definitely a difficult project.
So 12-bit.
12-bit. Who works in 12-bit?
12-bit architecture, yeah. So I'm going to be using 6-bit packed characters mostly.
Right.
My goodness. So do you? Can we throw anything else into the mix? What's your programming kind of style, Nick? Is this all going to be kind of acceptance test and test driven development?
Well, I mean, as much as I can, right? Because I'm doing this in PAL, which is the assembler for the PDP-8. Hilariously, the best assembler for the PDP-8, and I realize we're getting off slightly into the weeds here, was written for the Bay Area Rapid Transit System, because that was set up in the 70s, and the entire signaling and control and platform announcement system was driven by PDP-8's, I think, driving Laserdisc players to put up screens on televisions in the station. It was an amazing Rube Goldberg system, and it was through the 90s. It was the last really big production deployment of PDP-8s. So the people who worked there worked on, so the tool is called PALBART. Although I do have a more advanced assembler. I have a friend who has a PDP-12, and so I've been working with some of his stuff as well.
My goodness. So that makes it sound as though you've actually got a PDP-8 in your house.
I do not. I'm working entirely from emulators, which are, ever since you might have seen the PyDP-8 project, where you can get a sort of 1/3 scale console with all the correct switches and everything and all the lights. And so that just makes use of the SimH emulator, which, like any emulator, which we all use emulators on this show quite a lot. It's a similar thing. And you can just load up old tapes from, 1971, and all of a sudden you're running that system.
I actually had an Altair running on SimH, on a Pi here in the house, and managed to get it set up to accept incoming connections. So you could, I think it was CPM with BASIC on it. running on that Altair. It can't be. I can't. I'm trying to remember. I eventually turned it off because it was just sitting there consuming electricity. But it was a good one. I could be at work and then open a terminal window, plumb into the thing, and start writing basic programs on my Pi Altair. No, SimH is fantastic. It's got a ludicrous number of different machines it supports, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I'm actually, again, my friend has a PDP-12, and so does one of the contributors to SimH. And so there's a fork of this that they're working on getting the 12, which is sort of a combination of a PDP-8 and a Link, which is an even older machine, with a long and storied history that I'm doing graduate level research into at this point. So I could talk your ear off about that. But so I'm actually using this fork to try and get it working on my friend's PDP-12. The idea being that he can then drag in students and have this game actually played on the actual hardware.
Wonder, that's fantastic.
That is amazing.
Great.
Yeah.
It's a bit of a shame that they've shut down the that museum that's that in was it Seattle?
Yeah.
Computer Museum in Seattle. That's the sort of thing they'd like going on there, wouldn't they?
Yeah,
that was the Paul Allen collection mostly.
That's the one.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah.
There was a lot of consternation over that. People that had donated machines and were like, wait a minute, we did not expect this to be sold off. A few years later. Yeah, that was a rough one.
It's sad because it's exactly the sort of environment that you can. I mean, goodness knows how long you were allowed to sit at a computer for there, but that's text adventures in their natural habitat. That's that's great.
But yeah, so we've learned about Nick's PDP celebrity, for lack of a better term. What else have you guys been up to that we haven't shared with the Retro Adventurers listeners this year?
That's a difficult one, isn't it? I mean, outside of the podcast and things, I'm still on the game development. I very recently signed a contract with the Italian University Link campus to take on some students. So that's going to be my next few months of work, hopefully next year.
And that's on a contemporary game development project, right?
It's on a contemporary game development. So sadly, we won't be making retro games, but it's still going down the route of game development. So we're heading in the right direction.
I've not really been touching the games. What I found myself doing is working with a lot of projects this year, which are on. I suppose it's getting on for being retro, basically, So whether it's COBOL or Adabas or Java in a version that is sort of 1 point something, something a lot less than 5, where people don't have the original code or God only knows what, and that's across a whole variety of different clients and for the whole year. It's been a funny one, really. So there's a lot of it out there. And yes, I'd much rather we were doing text adventures and games on them, but sadly not.
It's a fairly niche commercial market, isn't it, these days?
Yeah, well, it's amazing how many. Whether it's banks, there's a lot of it in banks, and there's a lot of it in government, and the banks are interesting. They're having to do things like request that brand new modern frameworks that are being put together to set up kind of internet-enabled banking and banking, open banking and all these sorts of things, making sure that they don't use the wrong characters because their old COBOL mainframes can't cope with base 64.
Yeah.
So there's loads of that kind of stuff going on, and genuinely fascinating.
I mean, it is very interesting. Yeah, I've got a friend who does cybersecurity for banks. And he said the most challenging part is you're putting in modern servers that have actually got to liaise with 1970s architecture. Yeah. And the way the banks simply don't move, and that this is what we've had for decades, and that's it.
And people are terrified of touching it. I mean, if you're running you're running God only knows how much money through these systems, and and there's no one there who really understands how it works, then you're in a stuck, aren't you?
You kind of are. Yeah. Definitely a tangent, but it's interesting something to explore maybe another time.
Absolutely, yeah.
Well, I hope you guys have been doing what I've been doing, which is going up to people at Christmas parties and saying, "Are you aware that I'm on a podcast? Because I have a podcast."
Yeah, I should do more of that. I mentioned it a couple of times, and you kind of get this. I feel slightly guilty doing that, but it seems to go over quite well, actually, when you do it.
Yeah, but Ben, you've got to be on the podcast.
Indeed.
Well,
Yeah.
episode 1 is still our most downloaded episode, so
There you
know.
go.
Well, yeah.
It was all downhill from there.
Well, we did get the feedback, didn't we, Jason? That it's a shame Ben's left, but he had the nicest voice.
Yeah.
Oh, how lovely! That's very kind.
Legit, a friend of mine was like, "Oh, really? Because I like his voice the best." I'm like, "Well,
oh dear." Well, I'm surprised you got that response. The dodgy microphone I was using made me sound like I was calling from the moon. So,
and mine was echoing.
it worked for my friends, so don't question it.
Oh, that's very kind. Whoever you are, thank you very much. There you are. It's a late Christmas present.
That makes you feel good, doesn't it? That's the important thing.
Absolutely. Super. Good
What
stuff.
about you, Jason? What have you been playing then?
Well, yeah, I mean, since I've been on each one of these, I have mostly been focusing my playtime on the games that we need to cover. That's a good question. I mean, I have been looking at like, well, what's out there that I can pick up? I mean, it's a lot more expensive to get stuff now than I don't know about you guys. Sort of the early auction scene in the UK and environs, but there was an era here. I want to say, kind of that early 2000s, and it wasn't even just eBay. That was Yahoo had an auction site as well, and that was a great place to get original games, from the 80s and 90s. Shipping was still cheap in the US.
Yep.
The US Postal Service would deliver pretty much anything for $3 or $4. The games were cheap, so I picked up a lot of stuff then. When we did that episode with Star Trek Promethean Prophecy, I was like, okay, I'm actually going to dig into this a little more. I bought that lot that I posted about mostly to get Star Trek First Contact, which is one of those games that I learned about a few years ago, but I do not remember seeing in stores at all. And I have always had kind of a sick fascination with Kobayashi Alternative because it was such a I don't know, good idea poorly implemented or bad idea poorly implemented. So I've been just trying to pick up those things that are like, okay, there's some historical significance to this or something we can really talk about. What I did want to show, and I'm we're doing video while we're chatting here, but I don't even know if I mentioned this to you, Ben, but I've got here the Book of Adventure Games Volume 1. This is a collection of hints.
To the reader, I need to go into sort of audio description here for those of you who are listening to this. Jason is holding a book entitled The Book of Adventure Games.
Yeah.
On the cover, a dragon breathes fire towards a man carrying a lantern, and in the left-hand side, it's obscured by the on the left-hand side,
the blurring effect,
stack of gold. So it looks amazing. What is it, Jason?
So this is the very first compendium hint book that I got because I was struggling with a game that I'm hoping we'll cover at some point, Death in the Caribbean. And I guess I didn't mention this to you, Ben, because when you pitched this project, a little over a year ago, I've had this book. I actually have a shelf full of a bunch of copies of these. And every kind of December, I would think about like I should do a game blog. I should do a blog where I go through all of the games in this book over the course of the next year. And I said, I'm not going to do that. That'd be a lot of work. So when you pitched this, it was kind of an opportunity to say like, okay, now I've got a framework. It's not just me writing into the void. I can collaborate with people on it. So do appreciate you coming up with this and kind of letting me reframe this project that and I am definitely still going to pull some games from there. But yeah, the Book of Adventure Games for you guys, Nick, I'm sure this is going to mean something to you. That was where I first learned about Andrew Plotkin, who, for the past 30 years has been like the ultimate tastemaker in text adventures, but his Inhumane, which was an infidel spoof, was covered in the second book of that. So a lot of people, learned about him, in the mid 90s when he kind of, reframed what text adventures could be. But to me, I'm like, oh, he's the guy that wrote that really funny book a really funny game that I read about in Book of Adventure Games too. And he's kind of always been that to me.
Amazing.
Fantastic. Yeah.
So you were talking about the early days of the early auctions, of course, in the UK, and David, I don't know when it was you moved to France, but in the early days here, we had these things. Did you have car boot sales in the States?
Oh, car boot sales. When we came over to France in 2006.
Right. You're well after that then.
Yeah, well after car boot sales. Yeah. But yeah, you could get some amazing retro hardware. I mean,
incredible.
I remember going back to about 2001 and
Yeah.
picking up a C64 and a Spectrum for a fiver.
Yeah, that was it.
Yeah.
I got a absolutely mint BBC-B with all the trimmings.
Oh,
There you go.
awesome.
I've gone a bit Christmas there with all the trimmings. For I don't know how much. It must have been pounds, like
Yeah.
less than a fiver. It's amazing. And this was before the value started climbing. Everyone was into this.
Yeah.
Jason was a car boot sale? Does that terminology cross the Atlantic at all?
It's like a garage sale, isn't it?
Yeah, no, I know what
Yeah.
you're referring to. The analog here, and I never had this experience, but yeah, you would read about, like on Usenet or the early forums of the late 90s, early 2000s, you'd read these people saying, "Oh, I went to this flea market, or I went to this,
Yeah.
Goodwill
Yeah.
thrift store, and I found a portable Commodore SX64 for $20." I'm like, "Really?" Like, and this was like a legendary thing that people would do all the time.
Yeah.
Like that was
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
my personal experience, but it was a thing out there.
It wasn't my experience either, but I will say that there was a strong tradition. So I moved to London in 2006, around the same time. I guess, David, you moved to France. So I
About
guess
that, yeah.
we cancel each other out somehow, I'm sure. But
We balance the world.
yeah. So, but I moved from the U.S. and so I lived in the San Francisco Bay Area for about a decade, and there was a strong tradition of what I would call swap meets. So a swap meet probably got its start mostly from record trading clubs and that sort of thing, where you would just swap music, and sometimes you would just exchange records for each other, but usually it was you'd set up a milk crate full of records and sell off the ones you didn't listen to anymore, and look for bargains. And so there were ones run by hams, so there was a lot of radio equipment swap meets that would happen, and
Yeah.
it would be one of those things where community college car park, parking lot, where everybody would just sort of, they'd drive up and you'd have a hatchback and you'd open it up and you'd be selling old valves out of the back of the hatchback or something. Because it was San Francisco and it was the 90s, you ended up having these weird tech swap meets where someone would say, well, here's this bizarre motherboard from a test Sun computer that they never actually manufactured, or here's some wire wrap boards from Apple. That kind of stuff would just show up on the market that way. We did have stuff like that, but sometimes it was very, very local.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, these car boots were basically, I mean, they were anything, literally anything, and they'd pitch up at a field in the middle of nowhere at sort of 6 a.m. on a Saturday morning, and God only knows what random stuff would kind of come falling out of people's boots. But it was certainly it was if you were lucky, you could run into all sorts of incredible stuff.
Oh, you had to get there early. I do remember going out there
that's it.
deliberately to look for some retro, particularly games at the time. I was still trying to get them, particularly late sort of 90s, when there was still quite a lot of stuff around in its original format rather than
and of course the tapes and the discs and all sorts of back then they were much more likely to actually work, rather than just chew the tape recorder up or kind of spatter your disk drive with the contents of what liquefied whatever the hell's left in the But no, interesting stuff. Good times.
No, we're definitely were good times. It's one of those sort of it was quite a nice kind of memory, really, of that sort of period, wasn't it? Because the industry, it was really changing. It was becoming very console based, even by that kind of point. But it was so nice that you could get these things if you were interested, because you had people who were going, "Oh, I've got my PS1 now. We don't need any of these computers." And God, looking back in retrospect, if only I'd thought about it, I just should have been out there every day going, "I'll have that
that's the problem. That's the problem. Exactly that. I think that my last really big good one, that was once we got online. I think the last good one was a box, literally a box full of again, sorry, BBC man here, box full of BBC Masters, like 5 or 6 BBC Masters, all chucked in a box, and they'd all been sort of spray painted with the name of some local school on them.
Yeah.
But that was just, it was like 40, 50 quid. And those things go for, I don't know, last time I looked, they were like 300 quid a pop. So
that's virtually actually what they cost at the time, though, wasn't it? I mean, back in the 80s, they were really expensive. They were pricey machines.
They were. Yeah, but back then it's a bit like buying Bitcoin back then. You could buy them then and buy them now, and the value's gone through the roof. I've had more luck with retro machines than I have with Bitcoin, though. So.
Yeah, what were your machine journeys? I think we talked about this a little bit on episode one, but that means that Nick, we really haven't talked to you about, kind of what your progression was. I was a Commodore 64 kid, had one of those for it was about 6.5 years, saved up enough to get an Amiga 500, and then kind of the Amiga dominated my 90s, and then towards the end of the decade there, I was actually pursuing my what is now my writing career, and I had to bail at the point where I just could not visit the websites that I needed to do my work on my Amiga anymore. So after that, the past 25 years, it's been commodity machines, whatever, Windows, Mac. It's not that interesting anymore. But what were your journeys? Nick, obviously you were strapping a PDP-8 to your back and carrying it to school.
No, I don't have any history with the PDP-8. It really is just that a friend of mine managed to inherit a 12 and is lovingly restoring it. My story, let's see. I mean, I was the generation that got Apple IIs in the schools. And we had the logo courses with the robots. But when it came time to get a computer for home, my father was a classicist. And so he was writing a textbook for teaching New Testament Greek. And so he needed to be able to write documents in multiple character sets on the same page. And the only program that he could come up with that basically, we would go to vendors, we'd try and figure out, what can we do? Sell us a computer that will do this. Like we will apply for grants, whatever it takes to get the money to get this computer. It just needs to be able to do this. And it took us ages. And I think it was around 85, 86, must have been 86, that finally a printer company, a company that resold printers. They would re-ink the ribbons and they would resell the printers and they would make sure that these printers worked with your computer. Someone in this printer reselling business wrote a program called FontMaster 128, which made use of every feature of every one of these printers. And you were guaranteed, if you bought a printer from them and you bought FontMaster 128 and a Commodore 128, you could then write documents where you could get, ancient Greek, aspiration marks and the old style accents. You could use the obsolete Homeric letters, was it digama and copy and, all these other really obscure symbols, all there together, surrounded by your English text, without having to do like, leaving windows in your text and printing twice and all those tricks that people used to do.
Riley. As soon as you said multiple character sets, I was immediately, you said 1985, and I was thinking, oh, he's going to say the Mac. They finally got a Mac, and the Mac was able to do it because Steve Jobs is typography man.
No, you couldn't do
Commodore
that.
128.
Commodore 128.
Wow.
And the thing is, my father was something of a savant with languages. So he learned all sorts of funny languages. He was a classicist and he spoke Russian fluently and, all this stuff. And, he'd never really left the US much. But so he had that kind of talent. However, he was absolutely useless with numbers or math or anything that got too technical. And so it was kind of interesting watching him learn to use this thing by rote, because he did have some tricks. Like it couldn't display everything that it was going to print on the screen at once. So you had to pick which character set it would actually show on the screen. You have to sort of flip back and forth as you worked. And so he would kind of sit there hitting this button, cycling between English and Greek and all this other stuff. Sometimes he would write things in Russian and English together. And, you just watch him do this. And he'd kind of have to sit there flicking back and forth, making sure things were good before he printed them. But he couldn't remember his own phone number or his own house number, 3 digits, couldn't remember that. So it was really, it was astonishing that this was the piece of technology that he really clicked onto and worked with heavily. So we actually got a bundle when we got the 128. So this is why I'm trying to remember if this was 86, 87, because it came with bureaucracy. And so that was one of the games that required the more advanced hardware. And so later on, we got all these games that wouldn't run on the 64. So some of our Infocom games we had, would run in the 64 mode. Some of them would run in 128 mode, with big 80 columns and everything. And we got all of the C64 games like The Hobbit, which of course was reviewed in episode 2, I think here, and a few other things. And we used that for a long time until late 80s. My best friend, her mother was a law professor and was upgrading her computers. And she basically had 2 XT class machines. She gave one to her daughter and one to me as a gift. And that set me off on the DOS path. And then from there, I went off to university and got into Linux and started doing that. However, it was when I was at university that I found an absolute thrown away Commodore 64 and started setting that up in my dormitory room, hooking it up to my roommate's television set. And that was actually the first. I had a copy. I started bringing copies of my Infocom games, to university to play them there on this 64. And that was actually the first time I remember finishing Planetfall. We'd had it for ages on the 128, and I'd played it with my brother, and we'd always get distracted or fight over who got to use the computer. But here I was procrastinating for my exams, and that was when I finished Planetfall.
There you go.
I can't remember if we've had this discussion or not in the first episode. I'm trying to. I don't want to bore the viewers by rehearsing.
Yeah, we talked a little bit, and it's been a while, and they like your voice, so let's
there
have
we
it.
go.
Yeah.
You can listen to me. So it's an interesting one with the C64 thing. So I wasn't allowed a computer. My parents were very anti-computer until I think at 10 I managed to convince them to take an old knackered ZX81 without RAM pack that somebody was getting rid of. I don't know where it came from. I can't remember now. But I tried all sorts of things with that and mucked about with it. Finally at 11 got an Amstrad CPC. And
that's quite a jump.
Yeah, absolutely.
One K ZX81.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's an interesting thing that the CPC, and one of the first things I had on that was a text adventure. But before all of that, I had friends locally who are all C64 and BBC people, and so I'd become absolutely hooked on Twinkington Valley on the C64 that a friend of mine had, and we used to. I mean, you all have experienced the joy that is Twinkington Valley now. Roam around, give beer to elf, that sort of thing.
We discussed that about the fourth episode.
Yeah, I was going to say the fourth episode.
Yeah, I think it's fourth episode.
So we obviously we were young. I think at that time we were like maybe 9, 10 years old. Didn't really know what we were doing, and then one day discovered, nestled amongst his father's business files, we found a lovingly drawn map of the whole of the Twinkling Valley world. And his father had obviously got completely hooked on it, mapped the thing beautifully, and we used that to basically. I don't think we ever completed the game, but we certainly used that to do very, very well and get to you. He met the Mountain King and all of those sorts of things, and had a great time. So from the CPC, once I got the CPC, I started programming. I wrote some text adventures that were really badly written because I didn't have that idea of data structures and how you could, you could say there's an object that went to here and here and here. So it was very much kind of all based on go-tos and things like that.
All of us of a certain age did that. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, we all did.
Yeah. So that I remember that, and it was that was great fun. That was a kind of high, 8 whatever the maximum res on the CPC was. From that, thought that I was doing a really great thing by buying an Atari ST. Worst choice of my life.
No.
Awful machine. Keyboard like a trampoline.
What year was that? What year was that?
Gosh, that would have been my guess. That would have been 91.
Oh yeah, 91. Wow. That's about right.
That's it
was I bought an STFM, and the day I bought it, they announced they were suspending the STFM, and it was only going to be STE from there on. So I felt like I'd been sold a pup. And I tried calling the company and sort of trying to con them into letting me give it back, but they wouldn't. So when my dad got rid of the Commodore PC-23 that he was using at work, I leapt into that, and I think I fitted a VGA card to it, and started using that to write. And that was when I was able to download. I got a modem and all that sort of stuff, and managed to download a copy of the PCCA, the Personal C Compiler Assembler, and then started really, getting into all of the meat and the guts of all of programming, and then started actually learning about how to do proper programming. But programming on the ST was just a non-starter for me. There was no inbuilt environment. You had to buy this, had to buy all the assemblers and things.
I think that was true of the Amiga as well, wasn't it? I don't recall there being a language on the Amiga.
I don't think there was anything that came out of the box.
No.
And certainly with my Amiga funds, I wasn't going to be able to turn. I think eventually I found got a really dodgy compiler on a magazine cover disc, but again, it just didn't do the business. The PC was the one that got me for that, and then from there it was all C and assembler. So good fun times.
Yeah, good times, definitely.
Yeah, Nick's mention of the Apple II, reminded me, because that was my first time in front of a computer. For those that don't know out there, Apple had a policy where basically they would give any school in the U.S. that wanted one an Apple II, class machine. I forget exactly when they launched the program, but the school that I got was a fairly nice Apple IIe, and it was one of those things where, at least at my school, they were like, "Well, we have this computer that we don't know what to do with, and we've got a few kids that we don't know what to do with," and I was one of them. And so like, well, here, see what you can do with this. And so that was my first, not daily driver, and that I didn't have daily access to it, but I did have pretty regular access. But and the penetration of the Apple II into the school market, I think we talked about this just a little bit, like when Nick and I covered Macbeth, that I was shocked that it didn't get ported because, and I know that, conducting transatlantic business in the 80s would have been more difficult. If nothing else, you're making calls at odd hours and hoping you're dealing with with good actors and so forth. But a game like that would seem to have been a license to print money, even though it was terrible. I think you easily could have sold it into that ready installed base of of people with checkbooks who wanted software for those machines. We certainly saw companies like MECC. They sold tons and tons. Sunburst was another one. Just sold tons and tons of stuff into that market. So, not having the Macbeth game, not seeing some of those Topologica games, honestly, ported over. And we'll have Jonathan Partington on the program a little bit later, this year, and find out if he has any insight into why some of those programs weren't chosen. I know they weren't as penetrated into the UK market, but but there's this big installed base over here. Why didn't it make its way over?
I just remember being, admittedly, I was a young lad, right? And in this country, the equivalent of the Apple II was the BBC, in as much as it was the thing that the government kind of pushed into all the classrooms via the computer literacy program and everything. And just a fantastic machine. It's the one that I've kind of gravitated to now as my thing. I love it. But I just remember being that age, and the American market was almost invisible to us. We had magazines that covered games that were being released in this country. I mean, there was the only thing I can think of, the only link I can think of was the brand US Gold, who used to, and I think that their sort of naissance was finding games that had been released in the United States and publishing them in the UK. I think that's how they started out. That's why they were called US Gold. I think.
They were a subsidiary of Ocean, weren't they? I'm pretty certain. Yeah, I'm pretty certain.
The logos were similar.
That's interesting. Yeah. That's interesting. Yeah. So I don't know the full story there, but I think Jason, my guess is that people just didn't know. They had no clue, and there were maybe people in this country just thought, oh, well, we've got this good game, and we've released it, but it's kind of, maybe it was released over in this country and fell flat on its face, and they didn't think, well, that was a massive success. It's a license to print money in the States. There's just no contact. I just don't think there was anything there. I don't know about you, David, whether that's something that you experienced.
I think it's very true. I know Jason and I have talked about it before, and particularly with the things like the Apple II, which is so prevalent in the US and so out of the price range of virtually anyone like us.
I saw one once. I saw Apple II once. I thought it was the most peculiar thing I'd ever seen.
Yeah,
it's really peculiar. Yeah.
So there's a converse to this phenomenon, which is that for those of us who were Commodore users late into the 80s and into the
I was going to say that, Nick.
Yeah, that there were still Commodore magazines, or magazines with Commodore software and Commodore advertisements in them. And as you would flip through, as the years went on, the American producers and the American publishers stopped appearing, and we started seeing purely British games starting to appear. And it was clear that there was still a development effort going on over here, and there was still a market over here for Commodore 64 games. And sometimes we would get those imported, toward the end of the C64's practical lifespan.
I think we're really sort of talking about 91, 92, aren't we? When there was still software being produced. But like you say, I mean, it was almost a very European thing because the US had moved on quite a bit and sort of moving to different hardware and.
I think of those 8-bit machines. Certainly in the UK, the C64 is the one that had the longest afterlife.
And they were still producing them, shockingly late. And I always go back to this yes, I'd love to, I could be 25 years older and have more life and, whatever. But in terms of like being born at the time to be part of the evolution of technology that's gone on. I feel so lucky. And one of the wildest experiences that you can't, unless you were there, you can't really explain it. I had a work study job in college, which for you non-Americans out there, they're sort of semi-make work jobs that they do in order to put a little more money in college students' pockets here. And so I had a Mac. I'm trying to remember which. I think it was an SE30 on my little desk there. There was campus internet, or on Ethernet. So here I am. It's the mid 1990s. I'm sitting at a 32-bit. It's tiny. It's black and white, but a 32-bit computer. And I'm on a web browser. I am on I think Netscape. Early Netscape. And I am reading current articles. Commodore format was still being published at a time that it had a website. And this was blowing my mind. It wasn't published too deep into that era, but it was still a monthly magazine, being published in the UK. I'm like, this is amazing. In the US, the last commercial magazines were shutting down at that time, that they weren't getting that level of contemporary web coverage. But it was so wild. And, this kind of fits in with my kind of journey through retro computing, in that I never really put my C64 away for good. It's always been something that's been enjoyable for me. So there's always been one kind of pretty near at hand, which is not an experience that I've necessarily had with other machines. But so it's always been very natural for me, because one of the things that I was doing to kind of stay involved before Ben started up Retro Adventurers was I was helping out with the testing and development of Osmu. I'm like, great, I've got a 128 and a 64, sitting to my right and left respectively. I'll help test this and put in some feature requests and figure out what's what. So, but just being able to kind of track the development of that machine through the the early commercial internet was pretty astounding.
Yeah,
it's a bit like
it's interesting. Go, sorry.
Sorry, was it a bit like the meme that went around a few years ago of looking up the dates of when the last samurai existed in Japan, when the facsimile machine was invented, and to realize that technically a samurai could have faxed Abraham Lincoln and that would not have been anachronistic. It feels like that moment where you're like, I'm looking at a Commodore 64 magazine on a website.
Yeah, I think the C64, because of the SID chip, I think it also benefited a little bit from the demo scene, and so it was one. It's definitely of the 8-bit machines, the one that I most associate with the demo scene. Certainly nothing. I mean, I know there was like one or two things floating around on the ZX Spectrum, the Amstrad CPC, and people are going to get all sorts of angry emails now. But
good. We can use the engagement.
Exactly. Answers on a postcard.
Say more provocative things. Yes,
that's it. All the other platforms are rubbish for demos. There you are. I really wind them up. But the C64 was kind of out there with that sort of stuff. So I think maybe there was a bit of that going on. The mod tracker stuff as well on the C64. It had all those other uses that I don't think the others that's had. So maybe that contributed to it. And they probably were able to sell them a lot cheaper later on because I don't know when Commodore wound up, but they had access to they were vertically integrated, weren't they?
Yeah,
So
exactly.
they could rattle out their own chips at a fraction of the cost of other manufacturers.
Yeah, it was the vertical integration, and kind of the mantra of that company was let's beat this price down as low as we possibly can and keep beating it down. And I think that really helped, rather than kind of Apple's model of how high can we build this margin, how high can we maintain that? Let's try that. And yeah, like this would be a rant for another podcast another time. But Commodore having wasted so much of its time on machines like the Plus 4 and 16 when they could have just put that time and energy into no, seriously, how much can we innovate and just brutalize more costs out of the system. The 128 wasn't a great deal, but for Nick's father, I will allow it. But yeah, the that crossover, and in a more retro adventurer vein, so we would get some UK titles, and we wouldn't always know that that's what they were to start with. Some of them were honestly easier to get through the pirate scene, but some of the US labels, Electronic Arts, I guess they were founded as Amazing Software. I only learned this recently, and they started using that label a little early on to bring over games like Delta and Dan Dare and stuff like that didn't get US releases. We had Mastertronic here. But what we didn't have much of, it would show up a little bit, but we did not have access to those, like hundreds and hundreds of quill games and things like that. I had no idea that those existed. And then when I really learned, for realsies about the Spectrum, which we only had the brief little foray with the Timex Sinclair machines. But in the 90s, when I learned about the Spectrum through emulation and just learned about this deep vein of these, tape load games, I'm like, this is amazing. There's this, and at that time, it was still, through the newsletters and that, still this kind of, hobbyist commercial market. So that was a whole, learning experience for me. Just like I had no clue that those games existed because they were not, maybe in a few back page, classifieds, but it just really didn't get distribution here. So there's such a rich vein of retro adventure material. I don't know that I'm committing to have us play all those quill games, but I'd love to see more of those and maybe even find out about veins of games that I haven't been able to play. I did find myself wondering recently, were there any text adventures on the Mattel Aquarius? Like the worst possible game on the worst possible platform.
It had a keyboard, didn't it? Yeah,
sort of.
This is one that I'm kind of Googling as we speak. But
if you're not familiar with the Aquarius, you're just fine.
I recognize
it's so bad.
You haven't missed out.
Interesting.
I mean, it doesn't light on fire and fall over as much as the ZX81, but that's probably the nicest thing you can say about it.
So there is I can having ruined this whole thing by looking it up on the internet. The Mattel Aquarius does have a text adventure for it. The rather probably appropriately named Planet of Demise.
Oh dear. Oh dear.
Yeah, they are. So
coming soon.
Ran on CPM on the Mattel Aquarius.
Wow.
So
there you
quite
go.
a thing.
Check.
Yeah, there you go. Amazing. Maybe we should put that one in the list.
I think the running gag. Yeah, the running gag platform on rec.arts.interactive fiction for a long time was, I think, the Clarion color computer, which was a makeup color matching device that would show up in shopping malls, like on the perfume aisle. Yeah,
I remember that running joke, and every once in a while they come up on eBay, and I'm like, well, if only. But yep.
Start your porting efforts now.
So Planet of Demise is here we go. This is linking right back to the start of the the podcast. Planet of Demise was actually a bold-faced rip-off of Planet of Death.
There we go.
What else could it be?
And it's absolutely, and it's oh no, hang on a second. Right, we'll have to come back to this. I have a horrible feeling this is someone's hobby project, and they've re-implemented Planet of Death on the Mattel Aquarius simply for the purposes of having done it. So probably doesn't count, sadly. There we go.
We'll have to look into it more, though, definitely.
For sure. The one that always got me was the Atari 800, a friend of mine got his father was an antiques dealer, and they used to do these. They used to have these. Basically, I think a lot of it was kind of um, house clearances, and they'd get the one or two sort of items that they'd managed to salvage that were quite pleasant, and they'd get those and sell them in the auctions, and then anything else would kind of get given to children. And he one day he received an Atari 800, but it was chock full of cassettes. Hundreds and hundreds of cassettes that had got random games on. No box art, none of that, nothing like that. And we found all sorts of weird and wacky text adventures for the 800 or 400. It could have been. I can't remember which. And I think you had to put the basic cartridge in and then load the stuff from tape. Those were quite something. We had a great time doing that, but I couldn't for the life of me tell you the name of any of them. A bit sad, really, and I bet a lot of them are lost to history.
Yeah, it sounds like a lot of those might have been like those soft side adventures, like around the world. Yeah, there's pretty good preservation out there, fortunately, every once in a while. And we still see today, the other day on one of the Facebook groups, one of those random Spectrum adventures got preserved. So yeah, it's still going on out there.
It is still happening. People are still doing it, and I'm glad they are.
Now we're coming up to the hour, aren't we? So
We are,
I sadly I can true to form. I can only stay for an hour.
Can do no more. Yes.
But Jason, did you want to talk about the couple of games we've got planned for the next episode?
Oh, you know what? Let's hold that off. 'Cause we've got a few balls up in the air, but I do have commitments from all four of us here to partake in some games. So I'm looking forward to that. Yeah, this has been great catching up with everybody. Do you have any gaming resolutions for the new year, whether they're retro or otherwise?
It's my resolution will definitely be not to look at Nighthawk again for at least another month.
Yeah, go on.
Go on ahead.
No, I was going to say, well, my resolution is actually to do another episode of the Retro Adventurers.
Very good.
Well,
there you
wonderful.
go.
Excellent.
There you go.
You've done 2 in 2024. Let's see if we can beat that total in 25.
We're going to aim for 3.
Yeah.
I'm currently pursuing a master's in public history right now at UCL, and I have a pretty easy resolution, which is that I have a January 6th deadline for an audio-visual presentation analyzing Trinity as a work of public history.
Good Lord.
Wow.
Amazing.
Yeah, so that's something I've already committed to, but I think I'll recommit to it on the 1st.
Excellent.
That's interesting. That is interesting. We'll have to talk about that another time, Nick.
Absolutely. Well, I'll have it done by then, I hope.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be good, yeah.
All right. Hosts have assembled. Hosts can disperse. This has been part 1 of the Retro Adventurers 2024 Year-End Chatisode. Catch you guys soon.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jason.
Thank you very much.
See you again, guys.
Bye.
Yeah, it was good to see you guys.
Hello, and welcome back to part 2 of the Christmas Chatisode. You may have been listening earlier. I hope you were. Ben, like the ghost of Christmas past, has unfortunately left us and disappeared back into the ether. But to replace him, we have 2 legends of the text adventure industry. And Tim Gilberts and Scott Adams are joining us. So, first of all, hello, Tim. Welcome. Thank you for coming back.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me. It's great to catch up with you again.
Absolutely too. And hello, Scott. Welcome back as well.
Greetings, all. Wonderful to be here. And I hope everybody had a wonderful year. We're getting near the wrap of the year and just want to say Merry Christmas and Happy New Year and Happy Hanukkah to everybody listening.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think we'll probably touch on that a bit later. But first of all, let's sort of talk. I mean, we're talking earlier, sort of from the host's kind of point of view, and we were just sort of talking about how the year had kind of gone for us. So perhaps start, Scott. We could talk about you. I mean, do you have anything you want to look back on over 2024 and say, "Well, that was wonderful," or "I wish it hadn't gone like that"?
I actually spent most of 2024 working more on a commercial product than on games. It's actually a comic collector website that I have a client for that I been working on. It's called comiccollectorlive.com. People want to look at it. It's for those who collect comic books, it's a wonderful meeting place for them, place to buy and sell their comics and find out about new comics and all sorts of stuff. Moving into the next year, we can talk about that later. I do have some work on a game that I'll discuss, though it's not as much in the adventure realm. And of course, Adventureland has been out now for a while in early access on Steam, and we can chat a little about that too.
Yep. I think we'd definitely like to talk a bit about that. And how about you, Tim? How's 2024 treated you?
Been absolute mayhem. To be honest, still having a full-time job that's taken up most of my time. So, but I've done quite a few retro shows, which has been great fun. So, yeah, I've made my effort to attend quite a few actually. So, and obviously picking up on Retro Adventures. I can't believe it was all the way back in April you put the first episode out. And, so that started the year off quite well, I think. In there, so retro shows and adventure podcasts and plenty to listen to as I drive to and from the shows. But yeah, I've had a good year, I think, relatively. So health has been pretty good, and we've been obviously, yeah, it's been good. It's been a good year, I think. So starting to feel like we're getting somewhere again in the moving forward. Yeah,
excellent. We're nearly out of time for the year, but moving forward is always moving forward. I was thinking earlier, I think it's quite kind of fascinating to actually have you, Tim, and to you, Scott, because you're really sort of the antipodes of the text adventure world in many ways. We've got kind of Tim, the impact that he actually had on the UK market, and the influence that you, Scott, have actually had as well, sort of from the US side. And it's really what we've got here are two of the people who probably had the most influence over text adventures from both sides of the pond. I mean, do you sort of any sort of things? I mean, you mentioned before when we were just chatting offline that you'd spoken previously. I mean, have you anything that you sort of like to add? The ideas about the competitions that you said that you judged. Perhaps Tim, you could talk about it a bit, and then maybe Scott could add.
Yeah, I mean, it was a few years ago now, but we did the parser competition. I think one of the guys from Infocom also did the judging. There was three of us, I think, so encouraged people to enter some games. And that was really where I sort of rediscovered the fact that people are, really pushing for interactive fiction and text adventure development still today. I was aware of that, obviously, through my retro computing hobby and things like that, but the chance to play those games and dedicate an hour or two to each game completely from a closed book situation, so no attempt to cheat, just play them as you saw them. That was fascinating, I think, and there were some really interesting themes in there. And I thought those, I mean, like I said, it was 2 years ago now, but that really sort of pushed me over to have a little look at what was happening in the current world of text adventures outside of what I've been doing, which is within the ZX Spectrum Next community. I'm quite aware of a lot of people, reinstigating old systems. But coming back to the sort of Scott and myself is the fact that, of course, we would never have existed as a company if Scott hadn't created that adventure system. That he wrote, which is really that influenced, I think, Ken Reed's article in the magazine in 1980 that was about how to write a text adventure game. He cites Scott's sort of database based approach as one of his influences, and that, of course, is exactly what was seen in the early Arctic games that I played on the ZX81, and then obviously with what Graham did with the adventure system that we turned into the Quill. So there is a direct link, really, from Scott's earlier creation in America, traveling over the pond as an article in a British computer magazine that sort of developed quite a few of the base systems that happened over here. So, I've got to give him thanks for that. I certainly wouldn't have had the influence on the UK market without that. So I think it's quite a nice circle to come around this long into the future and say thank you in person.
No, I mean, it does. It really actually does feel like it's sort of come full circle, which is a great thing. I mean, Scott, I mean, does that sort of mesh with your memories of?
As I get older, I think my memories don't necessarily get stronger.
I don't think you're alone there.
Yeah, so unfortunately, a lot of details tend to escape me. Like the other day, I was thinking back to Days of Adventure International, and to be honest, I cannot now remember the name of my general manager. I can picture her, I know her, and yet I can't come up with her name. That's kind of sad. And I'm gonna have to reach out to some friends and say, okay, who was our general manager? Do you remember? But it is fascinating to see the interest today still in games, in the retro style games. This year I did two retro shows. It's a very light year. One simply as an attendee, where it's fairly local to me, and because I helped out so much in the early days, they tend to re-invite me every year just to show up. It's called Midwest Game Classic. And I also went to the Portland Retro Gaming Expo. That was amazing. I got to speak there and see everybody and see all the things that are happening. Met some people doing some very interesting things with the older machines, which is like, wow, look at that. There really is there's interest there in both creators and the fans.
That is very true.
So, well, and speaking of current games, I'm going to put this out there as a game for us to play. I mean, I know the answer, but as we're talking, I challenge you to write down a list of the top 5 countries where Retro Adventurers is listened to. Give out points for naming the country correctly and having it in the correct order. So just as you got a break, jot those down, and we'll see. Dave gets an asterisk if he wins, because I've shared the stats with him on occasion. I haven't told him too recently, and I don't know if he always reads this honestly. But the Scott, Tim, and Nick, I think you would all be able to play fairly. So I would like to see if we can get a winner on that one.
That is an interesting one. Yeah. I think I'll take a back seat to that one.
Okay.
So we mentioned the article that sort of links Scott and Tim here. I'm actually holding in my hands a printout of a scanned PDF copy of the August 1980 Practical Computing article by Ken Reed called Adventure 2, Roman numeral 2, an epic game for non-disk systems, in which that exact system was described. And I've actually been reading it over the past 6 months. I think it was actually the episode that we did here before I joined with Tim, where I went and looked this up. And it's a fascinating look into what to do with a low resource system.
Yeah, it's a really clever article. And Graham actually did have an email exchange with Ken several years ago as a sort of follow-up and a sort of thank you for inspiring him to do the interpreter that he did as a result of it. And Ken said he did get paid relatively well for the article, but it was a shame he never really made the sort of move into an adventure system with it that he'd hoped it would be. It was maybe just a little bit too early, I think, perhaps before the systems were there. But several attempts even to give it away in a magazine didn't. So the printed article did reward him somewhat, but he was obviously quite pleased that the quill had ended up coming as it did. I mean, I can't remember the numbers. Something like 800 adventures, I think, were written with quill. So it's quite a lot. Quite a lot of commercial ones, yeah. So and obviously derivative systems afterwards, a lot more. So it proves the ubiquity of a system, and it was strong. There was some enhancements, but fundamentally the basic underlying number of conditions and actions that were within the quill parser were very much based on those in that article. I mean, there were several more, but it was a very well thought out set of basic conditions. Are you at a place? Do you have an object? Are you wearing something? You had some basic tropes in it with the darkness, and it was well thought out, really. So it was a really good article.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely true. I mean, certainly for the adventure systems that I've written recently for PC, I've still looked back on particularly the Quill and to probably a greater extent, professional adventure writer, just to kind of say how, if I'm going to use this as a core adventure writing system, what am I going to need? And you come back to pretty much the same things, regardless of what you're doing. The core is there, like you say, and it's been a great inspiration to me as well. So thank you as well Tim for that.
Well, you've got to thank Graham for writing it. I just had the eternal optimism of youth that we could make money selling it. He thought he might sell a couple of hundred copies, but
I think you were like 17 when you first started.
Yeah, 16 or 17. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
pretty young, still in school, really, when we were writing code. So,
But
yeah.
but having
Yeah.
fun and doing things you enjoyed.
Oh, absolutely. I loved it. So, although I think we talked about it on the show is, my early entry of going to the computer club and learning about the sort of computers vaguely interesting. So, I obviously got accelerated rather quickly after that.
Yep. Who would have thought that we'd now be sitting here looking at a screen that would have blown us away at the time,
Oh, yes, definitely.
and
Yeah.
having a online video chat like this.
Yeah,
I don't
across the
know.
entire planet,
Yeah.
Scott. Across the entire planet. Unbelievable.
I don't know if you have the AI turned on this one, but it could even be taking a complete summary of what we're saying and transcribe. It's an AI secretary.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
So-
do use a transcription service sometimes just for convenience. And yeah, these summaries are getting better and better for sure.
Yeah, the world is it surprises us every year with something different that this technology can do.
Yeah. God has given us an incredible universe to play with, and as we learn the rules, the things we can do are just awesome.
Yeah, they truly are awesome. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, it makes you wonder what we haven't thought of yet, though. That's
Yes, there are.
There must be incredible depths that we haven't even explored yet.
Finding out that
absolutely.
we live in a digital universe, I mean, that is mind-boggling.
Creepy.
So I wanted to throw over the question, what we all learned from the retro adventures this year. For example, earlier we were talking about just sort of what I've learned as I research more and more of these, and the depth of the magazine and newsletter scene there was in the UK that was adventure specific. And Dave, you said, "Oh, I still get out my was it Probe or was it Micro Adventurer?"
Oh, a Micro Adventurer, yes. I'd
I've
still
got the
get
whole
them out.
set. I read them, and spoiler alert: more coverage of those magazines is coming next year on this show. But that's something that I was sort of aware of it, but it wasn't until I started really looking at how to program the retro adventures that I learned more about it. So whether it's about the neo retro scene or stuff from back in the day, any of you guys want to share what you learned from this year?
I can say I learned a lot more about the American side of adventuring because obviously we didn't have the exposure in the United Kingdom. Obviously Scott's games came later, and I've got a copy of Adventureland for the ZX Spectrum, but we just didn't have access to those machines with disk drives. We just couldn't afford them. Yeah. So those games just didn't make it over the pond. I recently, as a result of one of the chat, I bought one of the Star Trek ones that with Jason we were chatting about in back and forth. So I did buy one of those to look at the sort of something I hadn't seen before on a C64.
Okay.
So I think there's it was definitely that I've learned from it is, and I learned quite a lot about Shakespeare. I have to be honest. So, although your early episodes did cover some of the first ones I played, like Planet of Death from Arctic and The Hobbit. Obviously, they were great influences in how we move forward. But it's nice to see the other side of the pond as well. That really is something I think that I have learned quite a bit from each of your episodes. I'm an avid listener every month.
It's just fascinating that there's still such a continued interest in things that happened last century, literally.
Literally, yeah. Well, 40 years ago, pretty much.
Yeah.
But
50 years ago in my case.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because Adventureland XL, part of the reason it's called XL, not only extra large, but it's also Roman numeral 40, and put it out at the 40th anniversry.
Clever. I didn't spot that one. Well,
that is a good one.
I should have made it a test question. Sorry.
Yeah. We've already got homework.
Christmas quiz.
Yes, the Christmas quiz.
Sadly, though, I don't know about for you guys, but it's both a blessing and a curse, the internet, because one thing I'm finding is a lot of influencers love the games. They love to show the games. And a lot of people end up not playing them because they'd rather watch. And if you've got a linear game, why go bother to play it yourself?
That is very true.
Play it.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that can become a bad habit. I noticed that with this, that's across all genres, though. My grandson watches a lot of people playing games, but he still plays games as well. But that thing of it, and I've got to be very wary when you talk about the adventures. I try to turn my mind off to some of your answers or spoilers, shall we say,
Oh.
where I have not played that game.
Yes.
Luckily enough, as Scott alluded to earlier, my memory's not as good as it was. So
Play
chances
it
are when I go
again
to
for
play
the
the
very
game,
Yes.
it's all going to be new to me. So it shouldn't be too much. But simple things. I didn't know there was a Rendezvous with Rama game. I'd never come across it, and
Yes,
that was one of my
yes.
favourite books.
I remember
growing up.
both the book and when the game came out.
But I never came across it. So
My
I'll
favorite.
certainly find that.
I love the saying, "Play it again for the very first time."
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah. And that's it. I mean, here we are. I'll admit I've never played Zork for all the way through. I've
wow.
got a Heathkit H18 with CPM and Zork on it, which I'm poking away at the game slowly. As one of those things I've never done.
And you're not alone that way, because one of the things in Adventureland XL when I put it out is I put in a ET phone home code in it, and people are aware because it says so, because it will mail me every play session that everyone is doing, because I'm looking for bugs, I'm looking for problems. It's still in early release in Steam. And what I'm finding is a lot of people will get in and they may play. A few might play for a half an hour. That seems to be the average. It's a multi-hour game or multi-day game. It's got the full original Adventureland game in it with some changes, and then it's got the add-on game. And I can count on the fingers of one hand the people who even made it to the add-on section. So people just don't seem to have the same desire to play through as much as to experience. The podcasts get a lot of interest, and the playthroughs get a lot of interest. People enjoy seeing people play, but not as much doing it themselves.
No, I think Jason would back me up on this one. One of the things people love these kind of things when we're doing this sort of interviews and we're all chatting about what we want to chat about. But we do get quite a lot of feedback about, oh, come on, let's hear you two talking about playing a game again and how you felt about it. And it's very different because this is literally a podcast. It's not like we're saying, oh, and then I typed take the cat and go north. We're not even doing that. We're just sitting here saying,
this is great. I love this. This is not like an influencer by himself playing through a game and doing a talk over. And there are some good ones that do that. This is the people side. This is let's get to know the games that we enjoyed. Who wrote them? Who are the people behind them? And that's where this is so wonderful.
Yeah.
And for me, I love that. I love reaching out and touching people's lives. I've literally gotten many thousands of emails over the years since the internet became alive. And a lot of those people that started as fans have become friends through the miracle of email. I mean, who would have thought of email back in the day when we had our little, in your case, the Sinclair, me, the TRS-80. It was like, an interweb throughout the world where you could instantly communicate with somebody, no less talk later or video chat. It's awesome. It really is.
Absolutely.
But still, getting to know the people to me is tremendous. And that's why I was very excited to be invited on this, because I like learning about other people and making new friends. So Tim we met in passing. Now I'm getting to learn more about him.
Yeah.
And that's incredible, especially when he started so young, being 17 when he was doing this. I was in my early 20s, mid 20s when I started Venture International. I was also young too, but not nearly as young as what Tim was doing.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, absolutely.
So that's actually an interesting point. It seems like both of you were kind of family businesses, but from different parts of the family, wasn't it?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, we were very much a family business, It was, my mum, my dad, several of my friends, some people we'd met. I mean, Graham just walked in off the street as we discussed in the chat with me, so that was just a lucky proximity existence. But yeah, it was friends, friends doing the artwork and everyone pitching in to help out with the production and the testing and that. So it was very much a family run business. There's no two ways about it. And it was riding a sort of wave of at the time of the change. But I think picking up on Scott's comment as well, it's actually the reason I love doing the retro shows is because of the number of people who come up and chat.
Yes.
And it's often that,
Yes.
you'll see the same faces, different shows. You'll see a similar group of people, different groups of people, but they're all great. They're really enthusiastic to have a chat, and they're fascinating to talk to. Because their lived experience of the product is what really you didn't have. Because back in the day, there was no way of getting feedback. You'd have letters with "I found a bug" or "Can you tell me how to do this? I'll get my cassette. Can you send me a new one?" But the reality is, it was quite a superficial knowledge of their lives and what they did. A number of people come up to me and say, "Oh, I had the girl, I wrote an adventure with it. It was all about our family, and loads of people played it, and it was really good fun. And I wish I could find that now, but the tape's gone in a bin."
Oh, yeah.
But there was and that was what we were aiming at, was that sort of market. It wasn't necessarily, it was great, the commercial market, but it was also knowing that anyone could be a creator, and how much
Yes.
fun they could have to create, and how rewarding it is.
You're opening up the possibility for other creators to tap their talents, and that is wonderful.
Yeah.
That made a big difference.
But it's interesting you should actually say that, Tim, because in the first part of this, we were actually talking about, you're obviously aware of what car boot sales are. Similar thing as Scott, your garage sales, where people will be selling
Yes.
things. And we were talking about how in the sort of 90s, and we were coming to the end of that period, and people were moving on to things like PCs and things like that. And you could go to one of these sales and you could find a Commodore 64 or in the case of a Spectrum or something for a couple of dollars or something. And that was kind of the point. I mean, we were just sort of really touching on how as media's got older, really, we're going to be losing touch with particularly the software side of things, where we really are just sort of relying now on restoration projects and things like that. I mean, I don't know whether sort of that touches anything with either of you, because I mean, digitally, as Scott sort of touched on, without the internet, we could have lost all of this.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, there could just be nothing but memories.
Yeah.
So really kind of sort of what I was trying to get to as well is that we were also discussing earlier the idea that certain hardware, like you said earlier, Tim, like things like the Apple II, as we've mentioned several times, way out of the price range of most sort of English people. And presuming from Scott's point of view that he wouldn't really have had too much experience with things like the ZX Spectrum or the Timex, I believe it was called over there.
Yes.
I mean, how do you sort of looking back? I mean, these days, I mean, do you ever sort of feel like you're kind of going for reverse things? As Tim sort of mentioning playing Zork now that he probably wouldn't have had a chance to when he was younger. And Scott, maybe do you sort of get a kind of hankering for these things going on? Oh, I'd love to sort of see what was going on with the English side. And
I did get an exposure to it because I had AI UK, and since I was very much involved with that, I knew about the systems and what was going on and what they were doing the work for. Because basically, they did the conversions to the UK market and the other markets in Europe, which semi gives me a clue to the answer of Jason's trick question later. I've got some ideas, but I may be wrong.
he's stone-faced. He won't give a clue away.
I was looking. Anyway, it was interesting seeing those machines. I know when the Timex Sinclair made it over here to the States, I was thinking, yes and no. I think they're behind the market, what the market was going to be looking for at that time. On our side, the very first appliance computer, that's what I called it, because it was the first computer I didn't have to build from a kit to get working. I was the Radio Shack TRS-80 Model 1. It wasn't even a Model 1 at that time because they had no other model, so it was just the TRS-80. And it came in two flavors, a 4K version and a 16K version. And I had the 16K version. It was green and white sort of screen.
I think that sounds familiar, yeah.
24 columns of 40 characters, I think, something like that. Very similar to probably what the Sinclair had. But
Yeah, something like that, yeah.
the market started developing quickly because then, like you said, the Apple came out. The Apple II was revolutionary, but it was expensive. It was definitely a high end. I didn't have an Apple II
No.
because I didn't want to spend the money on it at that time. I already had spent quite a bit just on the TRS-80. The base machine, TRS-80, by the way, was a cassette drive. It wasn't floppy or anything else. That all came later. Other machines came along. Exidi Sorcerer. I don't know if you guys remember that one.
No, Exody, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Always wanted one of those. So the adverts, they were incredibly expensive. So
Yep. And then there was the color computers. Color CompuColor, something like that.
Something like that. Yeah, there was a TOSA color as well, wasn't there?
yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
the Cocoa, they
Cocoa.
call it.
Yes, Coco,
Yes.
that was it. Yeah.
And that
I
has a
just
strong
bought one of
following.
those recently, actually.
Yeah.
Naughty boy.
Wait,
Oh,
Tim, if I may ask, is it an actual Coco or did you get a dragon?
No, I already have a fleet of dragons.
I thought so. Okay.
But they fly regularly. But no, it is actually a Coco 2, so it's a slightly later model, but it's only 16K. But yeah, it's I felt I should have the close cousin of the dragon if you don't know, Scott, that the dragon was produced about 30 miles away from where I live and grew up. So it was a Welsh computer which was based on the same reference design that
Very interesting.
Tandy used for the TRS-80 color,
Okay.
and it has the same green screen black capital letters only that the Tandy color had, but which made its text games quite brutal on the eye.
Eye melting
Indeed.
and the blink, the crazy color cycling cursor, like just there are a lot of decisions from that period of computing where you go like somebody said this is a good idea. This feature is good and helpful and people are going to like this. You
And
know, I
yet-
understand the corners that get cut for we don't know how to fix this. We just have to ship it. I understand those. But those guys sat there and they were like, yep, this cursor, this is the right thing to do.
Yeah.
You just
Well-
imagine someone saying, let it never be said that this is not a color computer.
Yeah, and I get
Exactly.
it. Brutal, just brutal.
Well, yeah.
Something that I learned, and you talked a little bit about this with, I guess we'll call it the tyranny of choice of the internet and what's preserved out there is, hey, we played 14 games on the Retro Adventures this year, and I'm quite sure I would not have played 14 of these games start to finish without the structure of the show. So
Right,
I'm grateful to that, and have you guys along either with them or helping create them as the case may be.
But it helps expose people too, which is
Yeah.
wonderful.
Yeah.
What I saw at Midwest Game Classic was young kids sitting there at the consoles of these older machines,
Yep.
playing games, totally absorbed and very happy.
Yeah,
And these are the same
absolutely.
ones that have, 4K UHD Xbox Ones at home. I mean, it is incredible to see that the younger generation still
Yeah.
enjoys the older games if
It is.
given a chance.
We had a young lad at the Dragon. I did a Dragon show in Cambridge, in the Computing Technology Museum rather than the Computing Museum, and on the free table was a copy of Red Meanies, which is a 3D maze exploring type adventure game. And he said, "Oh, can I play this?" And I thought, "Well, give it a go." I had a tape deck and a dragon, so we loaded it up, and it loaded second time. But he patiently waited for it to load, which was quite a long time from a tape. And then he played it for ages and ages and ages. Got himself on the high score table. But as you say, he seemed perfectly fascinated with the idea of a game like that, something he hadn't seen before. And we had a gentleman who sat there for probably about an hour playing Mansion Adventure. You had the book and the notes map in it, which was one adapted from the Tandy Coco onto the Dragon and sold in the UK by Microdeal. So he was sat there playing through it without cheating. So there are people around there who will still have a gun, and it's a discovery, as you say, Scott, because they find something they didn't know existed back in the day. So luckily the Dragon hasn't got the hideously flashing continuous cursor, so it's just got the bright green, the beautiful green.
Was BBC Acorn also much of a deal?
Oh,
That was a big deal. In fact, actually, we touched on that earlier in the first part of the podcast that we did with Ben. And if Ben was here now, he'd be screaming excitedly as he is a great proponent of the BBC.
Yeah.
But there's a very similar reason for the BBC to the Apple in that the education system, the government had an education system very similar where the BBC was created to be given out to schools to introduce basic computing. And I understand in the US, that's really what happened to the Apple and why there was such an exposure.
It was a very smart move on Jobs' part. He took the loss to get the machines out there, knowing he was going to hook future users and families. That was his intent.
Well,
and families, when they went to buy a computer, the kids would say, "Well, that's the one I use at school. Can we get that one?"
Yeah.
So they'll have to mortgage the house, but
in the case here, right, it was not government sponsored. It was Apple, taking the loss. But also a point we discussed earlier. Remember, Scott, Apple kept their margins incredibly high for as long as they could.
Oh, yes, they did, and still do.
And still do, yes.
There is still the Apple tax.
It's ingrained in the DNA. Yeah,
gladly pay.
But you did ask about the Acorn. And that actually does have a bit of a piece of interactive fiction history in the sense that Graham Nelson developed all of the Inform tools on an Acorn of some variety under Riscos.
Archimedes.
So,
he developed it all on the Archimedes, which, And what is it? Is it that he's lost his source code from curses and I think Inform before version 5? Am I remembering this correctly?
Sounds about right. Yeah.
Yeah, because somebody's like trying to reconstruct curses from source, which is pretty crazy. But
well, the BBC, we of course did Quill for the BBC and the Electron. Actually, we didn't do it. It was written by someone's complete aside and just turned up with it and said, "I've written this as a copy of Quill." Didn't use any of our code or anything, just wrote a copy of it and said, "Would you be prepared to sell it?" And that really sold well in education. We sold a lot of it through to schools, because
it was a platform for teaching.
Absolutely, yeah, through English classes and things like that with writing, and it was a very popular schools purchase. We sold a heck of a lot of copies on schools, but again, it was the equivalent of the Apple in to have a decently specified BBC with a monitor and a disk drive. You weren't looking at much change from probably £1,000.
Oh yes, I mean the
that
price
was actually real money then.
It was absolutely. Yeah. It's in as many thousands now. So it's it was certainly a rich person's one. I mean, we were lucky enough, obviously, running the company. We used the BBC as the cross development platform. So
that's where the Specky really played into the right market.
£120.
He hit the price point, and that was so important when it became the Timex Sinclair in the U.S. market. It was $99, and that was a wonderful price point because you couldn't get anything with its power, really, and you were close.
No, well, funny enough, the TRS-80 was one of the first computers I ever saw. Actually, that and the ZX-80, because my RE teacher lent me his TRS-80, brought it along to computer class.
Oh, wow.
And lent me his TRS-80 with a monitor and a cassette deck to
I bet
practice.
You carried that home carefully.
Oh, yes.
With a wheelbarrow, they were heavy.
They were, yeah. I think my dad picked me up from school to use it. But yeah, it was,
you must have been
a big influence.
Excited.
Yeah. It was amazing. And of course, I had a proper keyboard. So, because the maths teacher who also did computer class had a ZX80, which just had that. Not a keyboard designed for playing text adventures is the best politeness I can say.
Yeah.
Probably lucky there's only four letters observed on the parser on the Arctic games.
That was part of the problem with text adventures in general and going platform to platform, is the keyboard was really essential.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. So, well, we sold no end of those add-on keyboards for the Sinclairs, because basically people come to our stand, all ours had the extra posh keyboard from Kempston, and we'd sell the keyboard and a game alongside it. So
smart. That's a good way to do it.
Yeah, it was my dad. He was always very bright with things like that.
Yeah, I was intrigued going back to that idea of having so much choice. We have enjoyed up until Christmas Eve. The Retro Adventurers was the only continually updated text adventure podcast, Eaten by a Gru, which had last published in November 2023. We talked about this a little bit when Ben was on, where Ben, one of the reasons he wanted to start Retro Adventurers was that their publishing schedule had slowed down, and that turned out to be really prescient because they went 13 months without having an episode. Well, they are back now. And one of the hosts on the Christmas Eve episode they dropped was saying that his approach to dealing with the tyranny of choice in his arcade emulator console, he's got a stand-up MAME arcade, is he's gone to the extreme of he's got a script that runs on the machine. At the beginning of the month, the machine picks one and only one arcade game that it'll play, and
that's the monthly game.
He further rations it by saying he gets the equivalent of $5 in quarters. He gives himself 20 plays for the entire month. Now that to me, that's really extreme rationing. But like I was saying, you know, some sort of structure was necessary for me because as much as I love these games and always have, I hadn't played 14 in a year probably since I was a teenager, you know, if even then. So, you know, I'm grateful for that, having the structure that we have here to bring that along, and to, you know, Nick and Dave and Ben for keeping me honest and playing those along. Nick, you want to make sure that we bring you in a little bit on this. You learned, I guess, partway through the year that, oh, this podcast out there, they could use some more help. So apart from just getting looped into it halfway through, what have you learned this year?
Ooh, what have I learned? So I am an American transplant in London, and so I have spent the past.
What part of America?
So I'm originally from Seattle, but I did spend a decade in the Bay Area trying to get involved.
So
in the
West Coast.
Yeah, well, I'm West Coast.
So all the way to England. That's halfway around the world.
It's quite a ways. Yeah. And I've, you know, if you think about it, I've spent the majority of my adult life here now, you know, the past 19 years or so. And so, like I was joking earlier in another session that I think I moved here right about the same time David left the UK. So we just about cancel each other out. Yeah, exactly. So I've had no exposure to the UK scene. You know, by the time I arrived, you know, the retro scene really wasn't a thing. There were emulators, they were a little bit primitive. And so really, you know, it was only the systems like Level 9, Scott Adams, all these other systems, you know, the Inform Z Machine, all these systems that had fairly well specified sort of virtual platforms that got ported separately. Yep. That was about all I had experience with. So really, it was amazing. I subscribed to this podcast the moment it appeared, and I was delighted when Jason invited me to come on and review a couple of games. Although I will say I'm still a little bit tentative now when he says we've got an appetizer game. It's going to be short now.
I will. Macbeth was a mistake. It was a mistake. I was not the first one to make a mistake with that game. That was
We've had issues. We've had issues before.
It's good. Well. It's good. And I will say I've also learned that, you know, now being live on a podcast, that what we call l'esprit de l'escalier, right? The spirit of you know, after you've left the place and you've gone down the staircase, do you think of the perfect thing to say? Yeah. And I realized that
isn't that wonderful?
You know, we talked a lot around this Macbeth game, trying to think of the best way to express it. And I realized that I'd absolutely missed a trick. And I could have said, it is a game written by a corporation, full of sound and graphics and signifying nothing.
Nothing, yes. Sound and fury.
Exactly.
Well, it's out there, Nick. Now you've done it.
Well, now
there we go. I got it in
before
the end of the year.
You've corrected it.
The historical record is now secure.
Where are you in England now?
So I'm in London. I live in West London.
Okay. Tim, where are you from?
I'm still South Wales based, so Barry, which is made famous by Gavin and Stacey, of course, as the UK. It's a sort of soap opera from a boy in England who marries a girl from Wales. So, or the other way around, I think. No, it is that way around.
It is that way around.
She's from Barry, yeah. But you know, it's a relatively unknown, but seaside town. So I'd had the classic arcades growing up. So play the arcade games. But I love the idea of limiting what you can do, because that's what those 10 pences and those for quarters for the US, I suppose, did, wasn't it? It limited how much time you could play. And I was thinking, just as you were talking about it and about using emulators, Nick, that I never really played a lot of retro stuff when I had emulators on the PC, because we've got the internet, we've got messages coming in, you've got emails, you've got bleeps, you've got distractions. Whereas if I want to play Zork, I don't have my PC on. I just turn the Heathkit on, and it's only got CPM, and it only runs Zork, and it's the only thing I can do.
Is that an H8?
It's actually, I have got a H8, but this is actually a H90. It's a H90. It's a H19 turned into a H88. So it's the twin. It's had twin drive upgrade, but it's
nice.
Yeah, yeah, it's a lovely little machine to play on. So I got a H8 which I played the original copy of Adventure on, which is, of course, 'cause it was the very first machine you could ever play Adventure on.
Colossal Caves. I remember when
Yeah,
Microsoft brought it out.
yeah. Well, the guy who did it, Letwin, he actually did it for the H8 first because he worked for Heathkit. So it was done a year
Interesting.
before Microsoft actually converted it. So you can play the original on a H8. So just
Did,
about, but it would
did,
cost you about £10,000 to have
did
the
you
parts
see the
back
new
then.
virtual reality version?
I've seen it and I think it's really well put together. It looks lovely.
Ken and
But
Roberta
again,
put it out,
yeah,
and
yeah,
I played a little bit in it. It's like,
yeah,
wow, I should be able to just zip through this. And I
yeah,
got stuck in it. It's like, what? Wait, why can't I remember this?
yeah,
It's
yeah.
crazy.
It is beautifully produced. But I don't have a VR headset. I know there's a question you sort of the discussion point we were talking about what you do. I don't actually have a VR set. My grandson's had one for Christmas, so
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 far,
maybe I'll persuade him to buy the
yeah,
adventure game and have a playthrough with him.
every VR set I have tried, and I've gotten seasick. So
Yeah, I
Yeah,
get that too. I can't
it's
wear them.
just not for
yeah,
me.
yeah.
Uh, but
I
it is interesting to see how adventure,
yeah,
Colossal Caves, has transformed over the years.
yeah,
Yeah.
So I want to continue my curious question about where people are at.
Mm.
I know Jason's almost neighbors to me. Well, what about,
Practically down the road.
I'll talk to Jason in a moment. Nick, what about you?
So yeah, I'm in Ealing. I'm in West London.
West London also. So
Yeah.
we got another London. I'm over in Southwest Wisconsin, which is a tri-state area. We're right by Wisconsin, Illinois, and Iowa. Right, I'm literally, I live a couple of miles from the Mississippi River.
okay.
Right now, I'm living in a small cabin on a feeder river that goes into the Mississippi. And Jason, I think you're also here in Wisconsin.
Yep. Yep. Madison area.
Yep. So and which is where I've gone many times. That's probably the largest metropolis that's closest to me would be Madison. Uh, and it's
Tertiary market, metropolis, 6 of 1.
Yeah. So where did your big adventure take you to then, David? Or you've exited the UK, but
Oh, I'm here in the French Alps.
oh,
oh yes, I
Yep,
know.
okay.
in the
Oh,
French
that's
Alps.
another answer
I'm
for that question. Then it's listen to in France.
in a little a little village which is just below Courchevel, which is the major ski resort
Yeah.
out here.
And you've
But
got some beautiful views.
it is truly is, and the air is wonderful. But it's not. I mean, originally when we came to France, we actually lived up in Brittany.
Okay.
Um, And my wife's family had moved over here, and my wife wanted to be closer to her family, so we sort of decided, well, we'll have a sort of new adventure, literally. Oh yeah,
Yeah,
What do you
Brittany.
got there?
This is the T-shirt I'm wearing
The
for the audio
Celtic
listeners
nations. Yeah.
is the
yeah,
Celtic nation, so it's all of them, including
yeah,
Brittany, of course,
Brittany,
and Wales. So
yeah,
yeah, in their original language around the outside. So
Huh.
yeah.
yeah,
They are very
Cool.
similar places. Brittany and Wales, very
Mm,
similar. The attitudes of the people are very similar as
yeah.
well.
Well, there's an apocryphal story I think that someone who was arrested in Brittany from Wales managed to defend themselves in the Breton court in Welsh. So
Hmm.
because the Breton language is close enough to its
Similar.
original Celtic origins that they could muddle through.
Wow.
Mm,
I mean, it's also very similar. I mean, Breton has a very sort of similar history to Wales when it's coming down to this kind of thing. I mean, the Breton language, which nearly died like the Welsh
yeah,
language did, and now it's taught in schools
yeah,
if you're
yeah.
actually in
So
Breton.
what is your retro market there like? Are you involved in it at all? Is there any retro community or
There
anything
is a
going on?
community. I mean, most of the stuff is basically in Lyon or in Paris, in sort of the bigger places. But we do actually have a festival called the Game Over Festival, which travels around Savoie, which is where we are. And my company actually had a table there about 2 years ago because it was actually held in our local town. And it really kind of hit onto what you were saying earlier about the interesting kids because although we've obviously made text adventures, my company also made retro inspired arcade games. And we just set up a few computers with these games on. It was really sort of a kind of introduction was saying, that someone in your local area produces video games, and it's just something for the kind of kids to do. But throughout the weekend that we were there, when we had one kid, and he must have sat playing a sort of, it's a top-down side shooter called Solar Wind, and he must have played it for 13 hours of the time he was there.
Oh,
Yeah, and he just would not leave it alone. And at the end of it, he got up and he just said, "Trey, cool," and walked away.
which means
Very cool.
Very cool.
Wow.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
So we have the Game Over Festival, and that touches on a lot of retro games, but it's also got more sort of modern games in it. They have PS4 games and things like that,
Okay.
and stuff like that. But it's that travels around, and that's had quite a good sort of following here. But you've really got to be in the cities if you want to do anything that's.
Are you a hardware collector?
I used to be. Unfortunately, in about the first 6 months I was coming to France, we had a garage break-in, and everything I owned was stolen.
Oh no.
Oh no.
Oh no! The only crime we've really experienced here.
Well,
Well, condolences.
yeah.
Yeah.
They stole your retro computing. So
Yeah,
I've always wondered if someone broke in, they go, "Oh, what's this old rubbish?"
yeah. You'd think so, wouldn't you?
Oh,
I remember.
Uh,
I remember in the 90s there was a break-in at a school where they had IBM PCs, and the burglars took the keyboards off the PCs, not knowing that that was not where the computer was.
yeah.
Oh, funny.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay, we got all these computers. Let's sell them on the black market.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I suppose these days everyone looks at eBay, they see they're all worth millions, don't they? And
My top goal in life has been to be a game show host, but there's really not a lot of opportunities for bald bespectacled Americans to host game shows. Second down the list has been to be paid to write, and so I get to do that. But you guys will please indulge me as you write down, if you haven't yet, our top 5 nations with Retro Adventurers listeners. I will share a couple of details from here. Pleased to report that December is the top download month for the show. I think we've got enough episodes now that there's kind of a steady stream of interest. And unsurprisingly,
Wonderful.
episode 1 is the most popularly downloaded episode. Episode 2 is the second. The one that's kind of the trend breaker on that was episode 10. That was the first one that Nick was on. So whether it's the Nick
Well
Moffat
done,
fan
Nick.
base, whether it's the fact that it was the first Infocom game, whether it was that murder hospital game, Crypt of Medea, that's the one that kind of breaks the trend and is more popular than its age would suggest. But yes, for the grand prize of not getting a prize, Nick, well, you don't have your camera on, so if you want to drop it into the chat directly to me, Scott, Tim, if you would either drop in the chat or write down and hold up your guesses as to the top 5 nations with Retro Adventures listeners.
Can we start with
All right.
Nick?
I got Tim's. Yeah, Nick, I'm gonna send yours.
And let me
Okay.
just open the chat.
you know the
here.
spelling error.
There's Scott's. Okay. And then Nick. All right.
Nick just want to talk about it.
Well, I'm sorry, I
Okay.
sent it directly to Jason.
Yeah.
I can
Oh, okay.
do that publicly
Yep.
again
Thank
if
you.
you want.
All right. So the guess, Tim's guess, he guessed the United Kingdom, the USA, Germany, France, and Australia, 1 through 5. Scott guessed US, UK, Italy, France, and Germany. Nick's guess, US, UK, Australia, Denmark, and the Netherlands.
That would be Germany.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, D for Deutschland. Yeah. Beg your pardon.
Holland, yeah. Didn't think of that one. Good one.
All right. So our actual tops as of just a couple of hours ago were the UK, US, Germany, Australia, and Canada. So I'm
You
gonna
put Canada instead of France.
Yeah, but so my system was you get bonus points 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 for the correct placement, 1 point for naming the country correct. I think Tim's going to walk away with this one. I'm pretty sure because he gets 6 points for the UK, he gets 5 points for the US in the proper position, 4 points for Germany in the correct position, No points for France, 1 for Australia. Yes. So Tim with my completely arbitrary scoring system scored 16 of a possible 20 points.
Well done.
Excellent job, Tim.
And then,
thank you, pure luck.
You get an extra hour on the dragon.
Excellent.
Scott scored 3 for US, UK, and Germany. Not in the correct order, but they are on there. And Nick gets, let's see, 1 point, 1 point. Also 4 points for US, UK, Australia, and Germany. Not in the correct order, but on the list. So Tim, in a walkaway. How did you do it, Tim? How did you train? Did you hack my my password on Podbean?
No, I just genuinely thought about where I saw people talking about adventures as I've been listening to things. So obviously, I mean, UK and USA. I mean, it's an English podcast, so tends to be a bit of an easy one. So but I know that Germany's got a good following for retro adventuring. So and they're pretty good at their English. So. That was a bit of an easier one, I think. So I was a bit wary of Australia. I was thinking Canada possibly, but
Canada's actually
unsure.
No, Canada's actually a new entrant. When I first came up with this earlier this month, and I looked at it, Sweden was in the number 5 position. Which I mean, and there is a text adventure tradition there as well. But you're right. You'd think your major U.S. speaking nations, you'd expect to see them all on the list, but it wasn't until recently that Canada. There's also I'm gonna look at this. There was a quirk. Okay, it's changed now. There was a quirk up until about a month ago where all of the states surrounding Texas had no downloads. So we had, Texas being a populous state, being a technology, state, the expected number of listeners there, but every other state bordering it had 0 downloads. And then there was like one lonely person in Louisiana downloaded. We now have a little bit in Oklahoma and New Mexico, but Arkansas still holding out.
Texas became the black hole there, and it just sucked in all the.
We'll have to have a retro adventurers float from Mardi Gras then to get those Louisiana
boost those numbers. Yeah. So thank you for indulging me. This has been the Retro Adventures Stats Adventure 101.
Hooray!
We'll see if we can change it for next year.
Yeah.
Well, I'll have to come up with something else because now we know the trick. But to your point, Tim, the UK listeners outnumber US listeners by about 3-2.
Really?
Which and we talked about this a little bit on the early shift. The fact that the UK had dedicated magazines and newsletters. Scott, did you ever pay much attention to those? Did you have ever much contact with Micro Adventurer magazine and the newsletters that came out of there?
Other than interviews, that would have been it. Yeah,
like,
that's a very good point.
It was just something that we really didn't have much exposure to. You'd see
part of the thing might have been because of the lower resources of the platforms that were available. Adventure games would have been a lot more prevalent as purchases.
Yeah,
because they worked well with the platform and they enthralled people.
Yeah. And we'd have to talk to somebody who's sort of in the publishing industry there, but in the US back when there was a magazine industry, you had your kind of numbers of what do you need to kind of be your base circulation in order to draw enough advertisers, make it worth printing and distribution and so forth. The UK just being a smaller market geographically, I wonder if the numbers were a little different.
Have you interviewed David All?
I have not. That he would be a great get if he were gettable.
He would be a great guest.
I have met with him and I am in contact with him.
Okay.
I think on Facebook, and he would be extremely fascinating.
Yeah, I have listened to conversations with him, and he's a wealth of knowledge. So.
Yep. And a lot of the early industry owes a lot to him.
Oh yeah,
it really does. Creative computing was the backbone of what a lot of people took off from. That may have been their first exposure.
Yeah. And
basic computer games was written for every pretty much what people copied out into every computer when they got one, wasn't it?
Yes,
absolutely. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. Listings and
as we've discussed in answering questions like why weren't there more Shakespeare games, or why wasn't there this, or why wasn't there that? It really does come down to there's a handful of people that you can name by name and say like, well, for better or worse, these are the people that kind of set the trend for this is what this is going to be. To your point, David All, his idea of what would a computer-oriented magazine be, that was the template for a lot of what we got here in the U.S. And the UK market did look different. They had some different influences, but you get these paths set down, and people aren't necessarily doing it because they expect to be setting the standard. They were just the ones that said, "Well, I think it should be this," and that caught on, and that's what you see. You see treasure hunts. You see explorations in space. You see magazines that have this kind of content that appeals to people coming out of the ham radio and model railroad market, and that becomes the thing that defines the industry. So
Britain's magazines came out of the electronics market. There's no two ways about it.
Absolutely.
Computing Today started in the Electronics Today International as an add-in for a few issues, and then became a magazine on its own. So they were mostly an offshoot, I think, from there. Obviously, we got the American import of Byte, but the reality is a lot of them grew out of the technical nature. People were building their own computers for a lot longer, I think, in the UK, because it's the only way you could do it.
I remember
someone like Sinclair came out with a kit.
Yep, I remember Radio Electronics had a subscription to that. That's where I saw the ad for the first Sphere computer, which is a fascinating story in its own.
Yeah.
That sphere is in round circle like a globe, the Sphere.
Was that the first one you built, Scott, I think?
That was the first kit I built.
Yeah.
I was a mainframe programmer at the time. My brother actually built a home computer, which was a 16-bit computer built from bit sliced chips. So he basically invented it. My other brother did a TV typewriter for it, and I wrote the game for it, which I called Space Wars. As a matter of fact, there's a video on it on my website if people want to see it.
Cool.
My website, if people are wanting to find me, you can always find me at msadams.com, as in me, Scott Adams, msadams.com.
Yeah.
And on a sidebar on the right, there's that Space War game. Also, I'm always open to emails. I will respond to every email I get. If you don't get a response from me, I did not get your email or I've died. Both are good possibilities.
Let's hope you didn't get the email.
So my email is msadams@msadams.com. I've got some things that are changing in my life. I don't know if this will be a place to share them, or I will end up putting them out on the webpage. I don't know where we're going with this discussion today. I don't want to intrude.
We are going anywhere our retro adventurers want to go today.
Yep, we are. Whatever you want to say.
Wherever the meandering road takes us, I think, Scott.
Okay, well, I'll meander into a brief history of what's happened and what is happening in my life. I basically retired from industry work 10 years ago, 8 years ago, 2016. I thought I was done. I feel God tapped me on the shoulder and says, no, you're not retired, you're redirected. I started Clopas, which is CLOPAS.net, 2018. We got a license, the sub-license through another company for the Redwall series of books, Brian Jacobs. We did a Redwall game, an adventure game. I'm very proud of it. I think it was wonderful. I think it's one of the best games I've ever done, and it was a total disaster in the marketplace. So unfortunately, I had invested most of my retirement fund into that venture. I don't regret it one bit. I feel God wanted me to start the company. I feel a lot of people that were touched by the game in developing it, or it was important for their lives. After that, I got involved with another company that wanted to get into the gaming business and basically hired us as ghostwriters for them. And during that time, I kept Clopas afloat and supported this company at the same time with the money coming in from that company to support Clopas. And that's when I did Adventureland XL, Adventureland XL, which is you can find on Steam, early release 6, and the webpage is adventurelandxl.com.
You put links on for you, Scott. When we publish this, we'll put some links to your sites and anything else anyone wants to talk about.
Thank you, Dave.
Not a problem.
And so that was 2018, and then I did a game for them called Final Pilot. This was for the company interested in it. Another game called Bubble Bonk. And we'll have links for those. It's finalpilot.com, bubblebonk.com. And then they decided that the game industry really wasn't working for them. So they decided to go back to one of their core businesses, which was the Comic Collector Live webpage, which I've been doing a lot of ASP.NET for the last couple of years. I tend to be a chameleon. I'll pick up whatever technologies are needed and work as needed. I do enjoy computer languages. My favorite's got to be C# of all of them. And I do like the .NET platform because it's well organized, well thought out, well supported. Okay, be that as it may, now we're coming to 2024. Wow.
25. Coming to 25.
Almost 25. So this year, 2024, the company that I've been doing this work for now, since Clopus really has not been supporting itself with its own income, and I've been supporting it as we're going, basically decided that they were going to be closing down. And so they are working to sell off their assets and move into a closed down phase. So the Comic Collector Live, not sure exactly where that's going to end up, but for whatever reason, the owner of the company that I was working with decided to gift me Final Pilot and Bubble Bonk, even though they had paid for the development with the understanding that they would get a small royalty in the future if it ever monetized properly. So I'm thinking that in 2025, I'm hoping I'm going to do something with Final Pilot. I think it's a good game. It's not an adventure game. It's a join 60 of your best friends in a real-time space game video. It's online. I literally invented some technologies in there, the same way I did with when I was doing Adventureland way back in the 70s, to be able to get a cross-platform battle royale game going. Anyway, that's my intent at this point, but I don't know. Come 2025, I'm going to see what doors God opens and what's available out there. I started I'm turning over to a couple of the employees that were instrumental in it and with it the whole time. And I've just started a small side business called Scott Adams Consulting. So scottadamsconsulting.com. And I don't know what I'm going to be doing with it. It may be, I will figure out a good way to monetize Final Pilot. I don't know. Final Pilot is up and running. So if anyone wants to try it, go to finalpilot.com and you can play it in a web browser. I don't know if you can still download the Windows desktop version. I never translated it to mobile, though I can put it on Android. I'm pretty sure it's pretty straightforward. Same with Apple. I may do that. I don't know. Bubble Bonk is a game that I did for this other company, bubblebonk.com, and that's on iOS only, and you'll find it in the Apple market. It's just a little quick arcade game that could suck you in for a number of hours if you got an Apple. Once again, these things really don't monetize well. That's the biggest thing. Enjoy making the games, got to figure out how to make a little extra money on the side. So that's where I'm going. So I appreciate the chance to share that here.
Well, good luck.
Right. Yes, good luck. It's great to hear about them.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, I keep wondering where which of the other hosts is getting the $1 million sponsorship offers for the Retro Adventurers. It's not me.
It's not me. It must be Nick.
There we go.
It's Ben. That's why I don't see him.
It's a labor.
Ben's run off with it.
It's a labor of love. I think we're each, when we get down to it, basically, we enjoy the game world.
Yeah.
We really do. And to me, the most fun of the game world is watching people play my games.
Absolutely.
Well, and and I'll relate. And I don't think I'm violating any confidence in saying this, because I think that it's very clear that that Ken and Roberta Williams were extraordinarily successful at what they did, at monetizing what they did. When I actually Ken initially contacted us, but when we actually had the interview with them on, he asked me a few times, essentially like, "And how do you make money out of this?" And I'm like,
Yeah.
"We really," and it was like, "Huh, okay." So, but
Yeah.
Volume.
again,
the answer is always volume.
yeah, right.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, as we talked about on that interview, the difference between the Williamses' exit from Sierra and basically everybody else's exit from their companies from the 70s and 80s combined, from the text adventure world is
They're blessed with
pretty
getting
staggeringly
out.
difficult,
Yeah,
or different rather.
they got out at the right time.
Yeah. But it's the same for modern games developers. There are lots of games developers that are games appearing on Steam every day, day in, day out.
Absolutely.
And how do they stand above the parapet to succeed? There's a lot of people, a lot of really creative stuff out there, but it's just the sheer volume now means it very hard to stand out and be
to
something
get
different.
noticed. Yes,
Yeah,
definitely.
and it's not just that. It's people are fickle about what they'll suddenly get addicted to and play a lot. And that's just sometimes it's the luck of the way it is, and it isn't necessarily any criticism of the creator or what they've done. Some of it can be absolutely amazing, and it's just undiscovered.
But
That's true.
It's funny you should say that, because when you take sort of look at some of the games that you assume have been really, really successful, and I mean, obviously you've got games like Doom and things like that, which they're still selling, and you can sort of understand why. But my wife bought me the Spider-Man game for Christmas, and I thought, oh, amazing game, I really love it, and I'm a big comic fan, so it's a big thing for me. But the one thing I noticed is that it's got like 11,000 reviews, so obviously, and I think Steam say that only about 2% of people who purchase actually review. So you've got an idea of how many copies it's actually sold. But when you look at the Steam achievements, the first achievement, 91% of players have got it. The second one, which is only about 20 minutes into the game, only 14% of people have got it. Which suggests that people have paid the money and then played the game for 20 minutes and gone. So how do you make the money?
We came back to this from the conversation earlier, as you were saying about the number of people who play very far into a game, Scott. But that is, I think there's a for us as well, but certainly for me, I just don't have the disposable time that I had when I was younger to focus on a particular thing for hours on end. But also the demands of life around you mean you don't get the amount of time to do it. Everything you do is a compromise between something you should be doing and something you would like to do. So that amount of time is available. My son persuaded me to buy Diablo 4 because we played a lot of that earlier, the Diablo games when they were younger, on a LAN across the house, and they were big fans of the game. And I did play for quite a while, actually. I made an effort to play for an hour or two on a regular basis, having spent the money for it. But I mean, he zoomed off and became very good at it, being significantly younger than me. But we did play together a few times, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. And it's beautifully drawn and produced as a game. But I just, in the end, I thought, well, actually, I'm spending my time, because I'm an explorer, so I would go into every little nook and cranny looking for everything.
Yes, absolutely.
So it was taking me forever to do a map because I wanted to explore every aspect of it and every detail. And I realised actually I was spending a lot of time really not following the storyline. I was periphery around the edges, expecting to find something unexpected, and that's not what's there.
Try Baldur's Gate 3.
Yeah,
there's a lot. That's interesting. That's a game that sucked me in about a year ago.
Okay,
and
that's still on my list. I have to be very careful about which games I buy, because quite honestly, as Tim's been sort of pointing out, I don't have the spare time, and if I buy a game like that, I mean, Baldur's Gate, even now I've still replay it occasionally.
The original,
the original, and I know how dangerous it would be if I get into a game like Baldur's Gate 3. That would be my life gone.
Well, my grandson's just had the Evercade with the Tomb Raider edition of the Evercade. So it's got Tomb Raider 1, 2, and 3. And I mean, obviously, Tomb Raider 1 was where my wife and I sort of rediscovered gaming, I suppose, playing that game when the PlayStation 1 came out.
Yeah, yeah, I
He'd
don't
go to
mind a PS1.
he would, our lad would play with it. He'd go to bed. We'd play for several hours before she went to work. Together on that game. And I think that really was I thought, well, this is what adventuring is now at that time, with the visual representation. And it was the closest thing to an adventure I'd played in a long time, I think, that I felt gave you that sense of exploration and maybe anything could happen. And that was a really clever game
That is the
at
fun
that
of it.
time. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that's what adventure games give you.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
The aha moments when you solve a puzzle,
Yeah.
and the wonderful moments when you go into a new room.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like,
Yeah.
oh, what is awaiting me here? I can't wait to see.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And
it's
the
amazing.
total sense that you don't know what it could have. Because you've got such a limited interface to it, it's possible it could be anything.
Yep.
Yeah.
There's it's limited only by your imagination.
And for those that are listening, fans of my games if anyone plays it, anyone plays finalpilot.com or Adventureland XL, give me feedback. You can say, yeah, I played it for 15 minutes and, forget it. It's not there. Or, gee, I wish I could have done this. And who knows? Maybe I can make it do that. I want to have something that hooks people because I want people to enjoy it.
Nick, you were going to say something?
Yes,
I was just going to touch on the fact that everybody seems to love exploration, and I think that might be the thing we all have in common. What makes us draw toward adventure games is the notion we want to explore a world that is a system of possibilities. And talking about other games that scratch this itch, about 15 years ago, I discovered an independent game, a little Java game, written by I think someone in Sweden, and they're called Knytt Stories, Knytt, and they are absolutely pure exploration. It's sort of a side-on platformer kind of game, sort of like what I guess you might call a Metroidvania style game these days. But it was purely exploration.
And it was 2D platformer?
2D side-on sort of platformer. And it was little more than just, can you climb this tree? Can you jump over this waterfall? Can you do these things?
And see what's next. And then see what's next.
What's in the next screen.
Yeah.
And it had an incredibly, it was a hand-generated, synthesized sort of ambient soundtrack. And apparently the author would go up into a tree with a palm top, I think it was an iPac of the era, to work on a tracker of some kind to come up with these extremely atmospheric soundtracks. So if you can still find it on the internet, I don't know if it's still around. It was incredibly calm.
So that hurt you.
And you talking about exploration made me realize here I am, 75 minutes into this. I'll drop a big topic. Anybody have any thoughts on the blending of what we would call the text adventure, the interactive fiction, and large language models? This has been a topic recently on intfiction.org, and I thought about this, and I'll just kind of kick this off. There's definitely the style of game that the idea is, no, I want the set of predetermined puzzles, the Zork. I want the MIT mechanical engineers to have sat down and given me 20 mechanical engineering puzzles, and I'm going to solve those puzzles, and at the end they will admit that I have beaten their game. And that's a thing that an LLM, kind of riffing on things won't give you. But if on the other hand, you want an experience that has exploration, has storytelling, not a lot of dead ends, and you can't do that, or I don't know what that means, or whatever. And then maybe at some point it sort of pats you on the head and said, well, we've had a good time together, and you can call it done. That's a different set of satisfaction than beating the grand puzzle in Zork 3 or whatever. But it could give you some closure. It's a different closure, but it'd still be closure. I don't know what the answer, what the applicability would be, but are any of you looking into that or kind of anxiously awaiting it? Or
it's an interesting thought for sure. Combining the two. I know in the early days when the LLM AI came out, my son went in and he told it, write me an adventure game in the style of Scott Adams. And then he proceeded to play that adventure game with the LLM. And I read through the chat after he did it and went, yeah, that actually does look like a game I would have written. And even had some somewhat simple puzzles that may or may not make sense. But there's a tremendous potential there of
Yeah.
mixing things up.
Yeah.
And not having the full closure of the aha moments is an interesting concept where you just play part-time. But then people are going to hopefully want to come back for more. That's
Mm.
always been the problem with it. Most adventure games are linear, as we well know.
Yeah.
We try to give the world what looks like an open sandbox when the whole thing really is on rails.
Yeah.
It has to be
Yeah,
because we
absolutely,
can't
yes.
make it any other way.
Yeah.
But an LLM could literally make it an open sandbox.
Mm.
Mm,
Yeah, but
yeah.
then I would get completely bound as I did with Diablo. At least I knew there was an end to that. You know, the
Mhm.
acts and the parts. It was bounded, but an LLM could leave you lost into a world that maybe never creates
What's the
anything.
name
Or
of this game? Oh, I call it life.
yeah, exactly. So yeah, I've got a friend who's really quite experimenting with this sort of using an LLM to generate the world that you explore in a way, but creating a bounding for it so that it creates a knowledge and it's repeatable, so you can go back when you go back to the forest. It will give you back a similar description but slightly different, but with the same elements that it's already previously created, because that's the bit that's missing is the LLM. If you walk around a big circle and come back to the room, if it's not in its chat history, it'll recreate the place with a totally different description, whereas he's sort of bounding it and creating it, so he's using it as a way of creating an explorable world but with a state, I suppose, to an extent that it remembers what it's created for you, so that it can carry on expanding it if needed. So I mean, people are playing with these sort of technologies, I think. So shout out to Matt if he's listening. So there's a few pints and a chat about it. So, but I think it's definitely there. It's going to be something you want to use, but
I wonder if one of our biggest problems is we're making our games bigger and more complex because that's what the hardware supports, when really
should be.
should be just
Uh,
the opposite. Return to the roots, target the 16K
Yeah,
minimal hardware, and make a game that fits in that, where you can beat it in a week.
yeah, or even shorter. Maybe
Yeah, a
just two
day to
sessions over an evening. I mean,
3 hours.
yeah. I mean,
Well, I'd say a week. I'm saying a week real time where you
yeah,
play
yeah,
an hour here and an hour
yeah,
there.
through an
Because
evening.
everybody really takes life in sound bites now.
Exactly. Well, we did when we read amazing stories as kids. You read a small, short story, just 8, 6, 7, 8 pages. It was
Yep.
enough to create a world, and maybe that's what the world today needs is lots of little short stories.
Hmm.
And if it's too big, you'll just lose interest.
I mean, there certainly have been some games out there. I mean, I play a few MMOs and things like that, and my wife and I play Lord of the Rings online, and the
Oh, I do
sheer
too.
oh,
What
brilliant!
what server are you on?
I'm on I can't actually remember Everglade, I think, or I'd have to
Okay,
check the servers.
okay, I'm on
I'll,
Roval.
I'll, dro- I'll drop you a message,
I'm
Scott, when I
I'm on Land Roval.
Arkenstone. What my child has just piped up. We're on Arkenstone apparently.
Okay. Yeah, I haven't played it in a year now. You
No,
can
we
thank
haven't
you
recently, but
you can thank Baldur's Gate 3 for that. I'm still, whenever I have any gaming time, okay, I'll get in and play a little more Baldur's Gate. And it's like,
yeah,
okay, I'm still not done with this game. What's going on here? But yes, Lord of the Rings Online is a tremendous, well done concept. It really makes you feel like you're in the Tolkien universe there.
it does, doesn't it? I mean, and it's also kind of funny we should sort of be talking about that now because I've just restarted reading Lord of the Rings.
Yes. And next, you'll watch the movies.
Oh no, we do that anyway. That's that's inevitable. But the funny thing is, every single time I pick up Lord of the Rings, it really makes you think I really want to write another text adventure. Just
Yes.
the way you read through it, it really it
It
inspires me
feels
so
like it,
much.
doesn't it? Yes.
It does, absolutely. And there never was a decent Lord of the Rings text adventure. There really should have been.
Hmm.
Sadly, Melbourne House dropped the ball a bit on that one after The Hobbit. But that's an aside because
And
we could
The
talk about this
Hobbit
for
never
years,
really did well in the States that I remember. I don't,
didn't it?
I knew it was out after the fact. I don't remember it during the fact. I really don't.
I had a copy. I remember playing it on the Commodore 64.
Okay.
Me too.
So yeah.
I don't know that it was the outsized performer that kind of durable performer that it was in the UK, but I think it did okay here. I know it was published by Addison Wesley, which is one of those oddball, well, I mean, everybody was experimenting with everything, so here's this textbook publisher, experimenting with games. So that I wonder if that affected distribution or their sales ability or anything like that, but it did okay here.
Yeah, we've mentioned it before, haven't we, when we did the podcast on it, that the different effects it had in the UK and Australia, where it was fairly influential. In the US, it's kind of sort of just got lost in the whole sort of maelstrom of games.
Well, it's one on the new Retro Spectrum that's just come out. It's one of the 48 games on there. And of course, that's actually got a proper, a dead flesh keyboard. So you can get the genuinely authentic Spectrum experience of playing it.
And getting crumbs caught down the side of them.
Yeah, I wonder how many people will actually rediscover it, maybe, and play it again. So.
Yeah,
no, it is interesting.
Have a bit of a renaissance.
And I know there's been a revival in the specky retro market of the books that have come out recently on that with
Fusion Magazine and Zap.
Yes.
Yeah, that's two of the shows I do. I normally do Zap for the 64, Commodore 64. I unfortunately had COVID, so I couldn't run the Adventure Stand of Zap, but I did do, just recently, I did the Crash live and ran the Adventure Stand for that. But the Crash magazine publishes, and it has an adventure column every issue, which is written. And so does the ZX Spectrum Next magazine, which is on issue 5, I think. So that's now got a column written by me. Might be my first ever paid gig in adventure writing adventures for a long time. Well, I was told it wasn't a paid gig. I haven't actually seen any more. Just seen the article.
That's how they get you, Tim.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it might be a paid gig. Oh, okay. Well, I'll do it.
For someone. Someone's getting paid.
Yeah, it's a labor of love.
It is absolutely, and it's great, that there's an interest enough to fill 3 pages in a published magazine again, and also in Crash itself. And the annuals include an adventure section as well, which is great.
And as much as online PDFs are wonderful, the touchy-feely of a real magazine is hard to beat.
Yeah, and one of my intentions for next year is I've got several retro books I've bought over the year, and I'm going to actually finish reading some of them. I've obviously the 50 Years of Text Adventures. I've read some sections of it, but I haven't finished it yet, and I really need to put my effort in on that. So I really, really do need to put some time in on those books because they are. It's a much better experience to sit there with a light on and just immerse yourself in a book.
So much time, so little to do. Scratch that. Reverse.
Yeah, scratch that.
Yeah, that was a dream world we were entering there, Scott.
It kind of was, wasn't it? Yeah. Right. I mean, has anybody got anything else they'd like to talk about? I think we're an hour and a half into this. I mean, we can carry on if you'd like.
And this was supposed to be a 15-minute interview? What?
Oh, we lied, Scott.
No.
Again, this is how we get you in.
You did ask if there was anything that you thought was fascinating. One of the ones I love showing at the shows is a sort of proto-adventure game on the MK14. That there's a game called Maze, which came out in Computing Today in May 1979, and I always run it on an MK14 on the Adventure Stand so people can explain it. For those from the American side, you probably come across one called Kim Venture, which is considered to be an early version of Adventure on the Kim, which was the predecessor of the Pet. Yeah, the Kim 1. There's actually an adventure game for it called Kim Venture, which is playable and is quite well written. But the MK14 being the sort of British equivalent of the early kit computer with just a 7-segment display. But that is actually was an article submitted by someone, and it is actually an adventure writing system. So it has the idea of some locations and a database and runs through it in 512 bytes. But you play the game and you can wander through it and find the fountain and get eaten by the lion, and it's just unbelievable what people could do. Even in the early days, it's obviously seen an adventure somewhere else and wanted to sort of create it into the world. And I think capturing that history is really important as well. So there's that traceability from the earliest days of mainframe adventures onto the micro community. I think preserving those couple of proto games is really important. That sort of work that was done with the 50 Years of Text games and that capture of the knowledge. And people could learn a lot, I think, by seeing some of these earlier examples. You touched on this earlier, Scott. Maybe what we need is games that fit in 16K because it's
Mm-hmm.
the limitation creates an amount of creativity that if
Yes.
you've got for it as much hardware and as much processing power as you want to throw at it, then you tend to be.
You
I
keep
think
adding
maybe,
stuff.
yeah, you do. Yeah.
Are we done yet?
Yeah, yeah,
Mm.
exactly. Whereas if you set yourself a goal of bounded, I think that's what appeals to people when they write for the Spectrum Next. There's probably about 10,000 out there now, and there's quite a good market for the games written with it. People do actually make a little bit of money selling the games for it. Not necessarily adventure games so much, although there are several good ones for it. They get that. People appreciate the fact that the game is accessible, quick, can be played, pick up, drop down, save where you are, go back in. But also the fact that the game has a bounded creation again. It's the same thing. The author knows that 6-8 months later they'll have a game that is finished. They don't have to spend 5 years creating a AAA title.
Mm-hmm.
So
To be honest, though, I think the industry is sort of heading back in that direction anyway. That I think the games have got smaller,
Yeah.
and I think part of that is because of indie developers. And an indie developer, even if they've got 3 or 4 people on their team, they haven't got millions to spend on investing in it. And
they're bounded.
yeah, and so they're going to create a game that you might get 20 hours of gameplay out of.
Yeah.
And I think the industry seems to be heading more and more in that way. I mean, certainly, I mean, I'm involved in a project, starting on the 7th of January with a university in Rome called Link Campus. And I'm taking on some interns. And the idea is that we're going to, from scratch, create a game that will be published on Steam at the end of 2025. And going through the original design of that, even with the university, trying to curtail all the ideas that, and even with the university, you were saying, no, we could do this, it'd be great for the students.
Yeah.
Not if you want to get it finished.
Feature creep.
Yeah, feature creep. That is exactly it.
Yeah.
I think every art form goes through this. I think that, we had, be it painting, you had these periods where new kinds of paint were invented, new forms of perspective
Absolutely.
and shading and light and everything. And then at some point someone says, well, actually, here's a beautiful piece of art that, those Renaissance snobs would call scribbles or would call simple shapes, and yet that is causing an emotion. Film, we learned a lot about how to make film through more and more advanced techniques, and yet sometimes, really a static camera in a single room with really good acting can be really affecting. And so, having that creative vision of taking that, smaller, constrained, limited box and putting something to absolutely fill that box can be amazing. Finding the grain of the medium you're working with.
Yep.
I think that we're going back briefly to the LLM thing we mentioned. I think that from my perspective, we've talked about the lack of persistence of memory, of perspective that the LLM brings. I find it interesting in terms of, because I played with it early on when these things came out. Some of these, there was in fact a pre-built, play a dungeon crawl text adventure that's just constantly generated. And I realized this is a bit of a dream world. We mentioned that going back in a circle and not finding the same thing there. That's what happens in dreams. And I think that dreams can be inspirational. We can find things that inspire us to then go off and create our own art that has its own perspective and has its own conclusions. But I think that's for my money, that's what the LLMs do best, is to just, shake things up a bit, give us something random. It's a bit like the paste ups and the cut ups that they used to do in the 60s, where they would glue like an entire book together and cut lines out to let other words from other pages strike through, just to see if they were inspired.
Okay, cool. I've never heard of that one.
No, it's an interesting point.
Well,
so go for it, Tim. I was just going to say, I think we could sit here and discuss the concepts of game design for weeks.
Yeah. I was just going to shout out to that sort of thing. Is I backed one on Kickstarter a while ago called Lunark, which is like a side exploring platform adventure type game, which is quite well done. So I thought it might end up on the Spectrum Next, but it's perfectly playable on my Linux box, and I do enjoy that. So there are little gems out there of games, but again, solo developer who's produced a really amazing little game.
and what that does bring up the hardware platform question. Where do you focus your effort for? Which platform? Because if you go back to the retro platforms, it's hard to target something for one machine and expect it to run on any other, because they're all so unique.
Which
Yeah,
is exactly
absolutely.
where the Z5 interpreter is so great, because you can make a rod and game for that platform and it'll run anywhere. Same with Dart, Adventuron can produce Dart output that can compile for almost any machine, so any retro platform. So if you produce a game, I mean, Stefan Vought's done that with his games, the Hibernated series, and what was the other
How
one
many
he did?
people are playing them on the actual hardware? How many are playing them in retro, in emulators?
Don't know really, but I mean, a lot of people I think are playing his on retro hardware because they do actually, because he produces it for it. It's part of that visceral
And then they
experience
have
to use the
touchy
machine.
feeling, yeah.
Yeah, it's something different, I think, to play it on the retro hardware. And like harken back to the fact that when I play Zork on the Heathkit, that's all I'm focused on. There is no distraction.
I think one of the this is a thought I had earlier, forgot to share. I think one of the biggest changes to our industry is due to the pocket computer, the telephone,
Yeah.
because it is drawing us in so many different directions, and it is a portal to so much.
Yep.
But again, it comes down to
cornucopia.
But again, it comes down to sort of about processing power, really, aren't you? I mean, 10 years ago, you couldn't have imagined that a phone was going to be able to do what it does now. And I mean, you've pretty much got a gaming console in your pocket.
We have the entire Apollo space program that put man on the moon, including all the computers running on the ground and the design computers, all wrapped up into our telephone.
Yep.
What?
Yep.
Well, Scott, I must say, I'm willing to bet you that your headphones have more processing power than that Apollo computer.
Probably true.
Yeah. But it's not as exotic and as wonderful to look at.
No.
But you still can't play a text adventure properly on a phone. I mean, the interface just isn't up to it, really, is it?
No, it's not. No.
Yeah, bring back the trio. Bring back things with proper keyboards in them. That's what I say.
Oh yeah.
Scion 3A, the handspring trio with the keyboards. That was a nice sweet spot, because of course you could run the Infocom games on them because that's available everywhere.
Yeah.
But yeah, losing the physical keyboard really took us out of it. And then for
more
that make things fit. I'm
So
sorry?
the Blackberries, I was just thinking of that.
No more
yeah.
Blackberries.
Yeah,
Yep.
you had to
I'm
prise
sorry, I
mine
don't
out
have-
of my dead cold hands when we switched phones and took away the little keyboards. So.
I will have to send a photograph along because obviously I don't have my camera up and this is an audio podcast anyway, but I do have something called a beepy, which is a little board that has an LCD screen on it that can do, I think, 80 by 25. It has an actual BlackBerry keyboard, often with the language pack for some other place that I can't identify. I think this one's Turkish. And then it has a little space for a tiny lithium polymer battery, and then a place to plug in a Raspberry Pi Zero. And so I've got all of this in a clear plastic case, and I absolutely use this as my. I've got Frotz on here because it runs Linux in the Raspberry Pi, and I just play Z Machine games on here.
I completely missed this.
Along.
I'm looking at the Hackaday article about it now. I totally missed that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Similar projects rise and fall as time goes on. This one was just the one I happened to catch when it came by.
Sure.
Basically, they had a stockpile of old. This very much looks like BlackBerry keyboards, although they weren't allowed to use the trademark, so it was kind of hard to search for a while.
Okay.
But yeah.
Well, interesting.
Yeah, maybe that would suit the fact that like this morning, I spent several hours just sat in the hospital waiting for an appointment for my wife, and I could have really played a text adventure for an hour, couldn't I? Because you can't do anything else. You can't listen to music really very easily.
No.
But you could have just, because you're waiting to hear the name call, so you could sit there and quietly type away, I think. So rather than doom scrolling on some terrible.
Very good point. It just gives me an idea. Adventureland XL needs to get ported over to Android quickly.
Yeah.
I could probably do that in a week.
It should be quite a straightforward port, actually. It's not that difficult to move over to Android. It's a lot easier than trying to get them onto the iPhones.
I do not like Apple's development system. That's why.
I hate it. I won't touch it. I refuse to out of principle. It's I've just become stubborn about it now, though.
I hope it can have a predictive text system that doesn't use the existing dictionary that's got in it, because it seems to have no idea how to pick the words I use.
Yeah,
We'll
I
just
actually
assume
had
they're
a
Welsh.
excellent. I had a Z Machine interpreter from the F-Droid repository on my Android phone for a while that used a chat-based interface. So basically, your commands would go in as your messages out, and the text that came back looked kind of like someone had been sent me an SMS.
There was a startup just down the street from where I lived in Evanston, because I lived right by Northwestern University when I attended there, and then for a few years after. And they were building obviously they had bigger plans, but one of their proof of concepts for the old WAP browser, if you remember that, so just like single digit, they had built insanely an Infocom interpreter in it and brought me into their office. And I cannot find any of my notes from that visit. I don't think the company went anywhere, but they had startup capital. They had probably 10 engineers and staff working there. Had me in because I must have been through Usenet or something like that I found out about them, and me being just down the street. But yeah, it's been remarkable. Just any sort of nascent platform, people just jump on it and like, hey, I know. Let's get Zork in there, and then we can see if we can make this marketable. So yeah, it's been
interesting.
A lot of fun. I wish I could find who and when that was, but it's a little hazy. Somewhere late 90s, early 2000s, but don't have more details.
It's just the aging problem we discussed, basically, Jason. Now you've forgotten what you're doing.
Alas.
Yeah. It's when you stand up and think, why am I standing up?
Yeah, I know the
how many of you would play a text adventure if it was on your phone?
I probably would, yeah.
Because you can pick it up and put it down at any time.
I played Hibernated all the way through the director's cut that was done in Punion form. I've played that all the way through. Again, it was in the system that looked like a chat system. Yeah. And I basically would do that when my daughter was doing football practice, and I would just sit and play the game.
Well, you can do it with Adventure On, which is Chris Ainsley's sort of adventure system.
Yes.
That will play on Apple and Android and Windows.
I do have
and it gives you a little keyboard at the bottom, and it's perfectly feasible to play a game written with Adventure On through that platform. So
nice.
That's quite
I think the key really is predictive text going through the game zone dictionary can be it can be a curse and a blessing, because it can solve some of the hunt the verb problems, and it can also do some of the things where it gives you clues as to what's possible later on.
What if you don't give it the dictionary? What if you just have the traditional text pop-up keyboard and just play it like you're playing on a regular keyboard?
Definitely.
Then it's the same game. Speaking of Chris Ansley, I haven't heard from him in quite a while. Anybody know if he's okay?
Yeah, I saw him at Crash recently. Him and his wife were wandering around at a show. So he's about. He's a little bit quieter on the industry now, being married and out and about. So I know that, but he's doing well. So yeah, I spoke to him just recently. So,
I need to do a shout
very
out
talented
to him.
bloke. So for those who haven't seen it, adventureon.io is the website. So it's an easy platform to write a game with, and you can produce it for your for the mobile as well. So it works well. I mean, very retro style adventure, but it can do quite modern stuff as well. He's done some really interesting ones if you've not played with it. So he was aimed at the sort of education market. So but it's a really good platform.
If you haven't had him on your chat, Jason and David, you may want to.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, he's a big enthusiast and certainly keeping the flag alive for creation.
I would definitely recommend him. I think people would find what he's done fascinating.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you for the recommendation. I said we do sort of have a growing list of people that we'd actually quite like to interview now at the moment. So we are heading in that direction. It's contacting most of them.
Well, Chris wouldn't be a hard contact.
No, we reach out for you if you can't get hold of him directly, but he's got a contact on his. He's got a contact on his site anyway. So.
Because he's giving a platform for creators.
Yeah,
which is very similar to what Quill did in the early days.
Yeah, he says it was what inspired him to do it. He's there
you go. All these years later, and you're still inspiring people.
Absolutely, and that's good.
Yeah,
I think God gives us each talents to use, and if we use them to His glory, we're going to touch lives in a positive way.
Yeah, I'd like to think that we all have in many ways, and that we've these podcasts seem to be touching people's lives, and it's lovely actually to be involved in it.
Yeah, well, absolutely. I hope it long will move forward. 25 will be a triumphant year, I'm sure, for more learning. I certainly find it a great platform to listen to, and I have enjoyed this year. So please keep it up, guys. It's
we definitely will. We definitely will.
Yeah, good.
Two things I have found if you stop learning or stop playing, you start dying.
Mm.
That's good points.
And
On that note,
and play is learning. And learning, the most learning you do is when you're having fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, very true.
Absolutely.
Okay, I think really we're coming to a point. This is going to be probably one of our longest fun podcasts. So we're running up to nearly 3 hours by the looks of it with the
Oh my
with the
goodness.
first part.
No apologies. No regrets.
No. We won't apologise for it.
and those who've made it this far, congratulations.
Yes,
And now
well
win
done.
the prize that you didn't know was in the
You can have the trophy when Tim's done with it. Yep.
Yeah.
And a special thanks to all of our Canadian listeners, whom none of us, we all underestimated you. I'm very sorry.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes. And I have friends in Canada, and I apologized.
Yeah.
I also have friends in Australia, and I apologize.
I have family in Canada, so I did think of them.
So even more, yeah.
We should thank the 2 listeners surrounding Texas.
Yes.
It's
Please spread the word
growing.
further.
It's burgeoning. We still have to earn some converts in Arkansas, but
Okay, I'll get sorted this then.
it's finally flipping. Yeah.
Cool.
All right. Well, I appreciate you all making my last minute dream and scheme to have a year-end Chatisode come
yes.
true. So
No,
thank
you
you
for organising,
answering the
Jason.
call.
When you mentioned it was
I'm going to
brilliant
get in
idea.
a last Happy New Year to everybody listening, and may you have a very blessed 2025.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
good health to you all, I think. So
Thank you,
2025 is it's going to be a year where you really start to play some of these games again, please.
Okay, I think that on that final word, perfect ending. So shall we just sort of say generally for everyone listeners, I hope you've had a great Christmas and Happy New Year.
Happy
And
New Year.
see you in
God
2025.
bless.
Absolutely.
Happy New Year to all.
Bye-bye.
You've been listening to The Retro Adventurers, a podcast about classic text adventure games. This episode was produced and edited by Jason Compton. Please subscribe on your favorite podcast platform, including Podbean, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, and Podcast Addict. Visit us at retroadventurers.com and follow us on Facebook and Blue Sky. The Retro Adventurers is based on a format originally devised by Ben Collier, Jason Compton, and Dave Hawkins.